She came to restore a 100-year-old workshop for an anonymous client. Then a midnight storm Ma ripped an oak from the earth and opened a hidden staircase. And what she awakened would drag a century of silence into daylight and put her name on every headline. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Leave a comment telling us which city you are watching from, so we can see how far this story has traveled. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Derek Ashford's hands trembled as he pressed the phone against his ear. His voice dropped to a whisper, sharp and venomous. "I don't care how long it takes. I've waited 3 generations for this. My grandfather died searching. My father spent his entire life chasing shadows. And now some divorced FBI agent is about to stumble onto everything we've been hunting for." He paced the floor of his London flat, photographs spread across the table. Old sepia images of circus wagons. Faded documents with names circled in red ink. A map of Virginia with a single location marked. "The Hartwell workshop," he continued. "It's been sitting there for 100 years and nobody knew what was underneath. But I know, I've always known. My great-grandfather left records. Detailed records of what they buried." The voice on the other end asked a question. Derek laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "How do I get access? I've already handled that. There's a daughter, Emma Hartwell, 19 years old, studies art history at Georgetown, romantic, trusting, exactly the type who believes in love at first sight." He picked up a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and an open smile. "I've been cultivating her for 8 months now. She thinks I'm charming. She thinks I'm devoted. She thinks I flew across the Atlantic because I couldn't bear to be apart from her." He set the photo down. "What she doesn't know is that her mother just accepted a commission to restore the exact property my family has been searching for since 1926. The voice asked another question. "Victoria Hartwell, former FBI, 20 years hunting killers. She's smart, I'll give her that. But she's also broken, divorced, burned out, looking for peace in old buildings because she couldn't find it anywhere else." Derek smiled. "She has no idea what's coming. None of them do." He walked to the window, looking out at the gray London sky. "Book me a flight to Virginia, first class, and make sure the house is ready, the one near the workshop." He paused. "By this time next month, I'll have everything my great-grandfather worked for, everything he was promised, and if anyone gets in my way..." He let the sentence hang. "Well, let's just say the Hartwells aren't the only family with secrets worth burying." He ended the call and picked up one more photograph from the table. This one was older, more damaged. It showed a man in a doctor's coat standing beside circus wagons, a pin gleaming on his lapel. "Soon, great-grandfather," Derek whispered. "Soon I'll finish what you started." 3 months later, Victoria Hartwell stood in the driveway of a crumbling workshop, completely unaware that every step she took was being watched. Every move she made was being calculated, and every breath she drew was bringing her closer to a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family, her legacy, and the man her daughter loved. The trap had already been set. All that remained was for her to walk into it. Victoria Hartwell pulled her truck to a stop and killed the engine. For a long moment she simply sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the building that had haunted her dreams for 3 nights running. The workshop looked exactly like the photographs in the commission file. Weathered clapboard siding, sagging roofline, a rusted sign above the door that still read Hartwell Metalworks in letters that time had nearly erased. But the photographs hadn't captured the feeling. The weight of the place. The way the air seemed to thicken around it, pressing against her chest like a hand trying to push her back. "Mom?" Victoria startled. She'd almost forgotten she wasn't alone. Her son Marcus sat in the passenger seat watching her with those quiet, observant eyes that reminded her so much of herself at his age. 16 years old and already carrying the weight of things he'd seen but never spoke about. The divorce. The nights his mother came home hollow-eyed from cases she couldn't discuss. The slow unraveling of the family he'd once known. "I'm fine," Victoria said automatically. "Just thinking." "You've been sitting there for 3 minutes." "Have I?" She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Must be getting old." "You're not old. You're 47. That's barely middle-aged in FBI years." "Former FBI. Once a Fed, always a Fed. That's what Dad used to say." The mention of her ex-husband sent a familiar pang through Victoria's chest. Richard Carmichael. Good man. Patient man. 22 years of marriage that had slowly suffocated under the weight of cases she couldn't let go. Victims whose faces she saw every time she closed her eyes. A job that had taken everything she had until there was nothing left to give her family. The divorce had been his idea, but she'd known it was coming. She'd known for years. "Let's not talk about your father," Victoria said quietly. "Not today." Marcus nodded. He understood silence. He'd grown up surrounded by it. The sound of tires on gravel made them both turn. A silver SUV was pulling up behind them, too expensive and too new for these back roads. "That's Emma," Marcus said, "and Derek." Victoria's jaw tightened involuntarily. She watched her daughter emerge from the passenger side of the SUV, all smiles and flowing dark hair, and the kind of open, trusting expression that made Victoria want to wrap her in cotton and hide her from the world. 19 years old. Same age Victoria had been when she entered the FBI Academy. Same age when she'd still believed that hard work and good intentions were enough to protect you from the darkness in people's hearts. Emma hadn't learned that lesson yet. Victoria prayed she never would. And then there was Derek. He stepped out of the driver's side, all tailored clothes and easy charm, and a British accent that Victoria had never quite believed was real. 27 years old. Antiques dealer specializing in unusual historical artifacts. He'd met Emma at a gallery opening 8 months ago and pursued her with the focused intensity of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. Victoria had disliked him from the first handshake. Something about the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he looked at everything, including her daughter, like he was mentally calculating its value. Instinct, she'd told herself whenever the feeling surfaced. Just old FBI instinct misfiring. Not everyone is a suspect. But the instinct never faded. If anything, it grew stronger every time she saw him. "Mom." Emma rushed forward and embraced Victoria with the uncomplicated affection that had always been her gift. "Isn't this place incredible? It looks like something out of a horror movie." "That's one word for it," Victoria said. Derek approached more slowly, extending his hand with that perfect smile. "Victoria, thank you for letting us tag along. I couldn't resist the opportunity to see a genuine piece of American industrial history." Victoria shook his hand briefly. His grip was firm but somehow wrong, like he was playing a role he'd rehearsed. "It's a restoration project," she said, "not a museum tour. There'll be work involved?" "I'm not afraid of work." That smile again. "Besides, Emma wanted to help, and I go where Emma goes." He slid his arm around Emma's waist, and Victoria watched her daughter lean into him with the absolute trust of someone who had never been betrayed. "Let's see what we're dealing with," Victoria said, turning toward the workshop. The front door groaned when she pushed it open, releasing a smell of aged wood and forgotten time. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that penetrated the grimy windows. Inside the workshop was a single large space with rusted tools still hanging on pegboard walls and a massive stone forge in one corner. An office area in the back had been stripped bare. Someone had cleaned it out decades ago, taking everything that might have told the building's story. But they'd left the heavy equipment, the forge, the workbenches, and something else that Victoria noticed immediately: the floor. Years of dirt and debris covered it, but underneath she could see wear patterns, paths that had been walked thousands of times, and all of them led toward the northwest corner, where the floor met the foundation wall. Victoria walked toward that corner, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. "Mom?" Marcus had followed her as he always did, quiet, watchful. "What are you looking at?" "The settling." Victoria crouched down, running her fingers along the base of the wall. "See how the floor dips here, and the foundation? It's shifted, not from age, from weight. Weight. Something's pressing down from underneath, or was." She stood brushing dust from her hands. This corner was used differently than the rest of the building. Heavier traffic, more stress on the structure. "How can you tell that from looking at a floor?" 20 years of crime scenes." Victoria paused, hearing herself. "Sorry, old habits." "Don't apologize." Marcus's voice was soft. "I think it's cool. The way you see things other people miss." Victoria felt a rush of affection for her son. In a family that had fractured, he remained her anchor, her reminder that some things were still worth protecting. "What a magnificent space," Derek's voice carried from across the workshop. He was examining the forge, running his hands over the stonework with an expression Victoria couldn't read. Industrial metalworking on this scale was quite sophisticated for 1924. Your great-grandfather must have been an ambitious man. Victoria crossed toward him. "You know about Samuel Hartwell." "I know about everyone I do business with." Derek smiled. "Professional habit. When I learned Emma's family had roots in American industry, I naturally did some research. Samuel Hartwell was a railroad magnate who made his fortune in the early 20th century. This workshop was reportedly where he developed specialized equipment for his various enterprises. Reportedly. There are gaps in the historical record, as there often are with men of that era. Derek's eyes met Victoria's with something that might have been challenge. Fortunes were made quickly in those days, and not always through means that would survive modern scrutiny. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, simply that history rarely presents complete pictures. He turned away, examining the walls. I'm curious about the office area. In my experience, that's where the real treasures hide. Documents, correspondence, records of transactions that might explain what this workshop was really used for. The office has been cleared out. Has it completely? Derek walked toward the back of the building. In my business, I've learned that people often miss what's hidden in plain sight. Victoria watched him go, something cold settling in her stomach. Mom? Emma had appeared beside her. Why are you looking at Derek like that? Like what? Like he's a suspect in one of your cases. Victoria forced herself to relax. I'm not. I'm just tired. Long drive. You don't like him. It wasn't a question. Victoria saw the hurt in her daughter's eyes and felt the familiar tension between honesty and protection. I don't know him, Victoria said carefully. That's different. You've known him for 8 months. I've met him a handful of times. That's not the same as knowing someone. Emma's expression hardened. You know what I think? In that I think you can't stand that I found someone who makes me happy. Because you couldn't make it work with Dad, you assume everyone else's relationships are doomed too. The words hit Victoria like a slap, not because they were true, but because her daughter believed them. Emma. No, I'm sorry I brought him. I thought maybe if you spent more time together, you'd see what I see, but you've already made up your mind. Emma turned away. I'm going to help Derek. At least he wants to be here. Victoria watched her daughter walk toward the office area, feeling the distance between them grow with every step. She doesn't mean it. Marcus had materialized beside her. She's just defensive because she knows something's off with him, too. She just can't admit it yet. You think something's off? I think he's too smooth, too perfect, like he's reading from a script. Marcus shrugged. But what do I know? I'm just the annoying little brother. Victoria put her hand on his shoulder. You're more than that. You're observant. That's a gift. Or a curse. Marcus looked toward the office where Emma and Derek had disappeared. Depends on what you observe. They worked through the afternoon. Victoria photographed every corner of the building, documented structural issues, and made preliminary restoration notes. Emma helped reluctantly, clearly, still upset. Marcus measured walls and examined the old tools with the focused curiosity that marked him as his mother's son. And Derek. Derek was everywhere at once, asking questions about the building's history, examining items with an intensity that seemed excessive for casual interest, and taking photographs with his phone despite Victoria's earlier objection. By late afternoon, Victoria had confirmed her initial assessment. The northwest corner showed significant structural anomaly. Not damage exactly, more like the ground beneath it had shifted to accommodate something that wasn't there anymore, or something that was hidden so well it had never been found. We should head to town, Victoria announced. Find a motel, come back tomorrow and I can investigate the foundation more thoroughly. About that, Derek said, stepping forward. I've taken the liberty of arranging alternative accommodations. My family owns a property nearby, much more comfortable than some roadside motel. Victoria opened her mouth to decline, but Emma jumped in. Please, Mom, Derek showed me pictures. It's beautiful, and it has a hot tub. Sounds better than sharing a bathroom with strangers, Marcus added. Victoria looked at her children, saw the hope in Emma's face, the practical acceptance in Marcus's, and she remembered what it felt like to always be the one who said no, the one who saw danger in every shadow, the one who couldn't relax even when relaxation was exactly what was needed. Fine, she said. One night. Derek's smile widened. Excellent. I think you'll find it quite comfortable. They locked up the workshop and followed Derek's SUV down increasingly remote roads until they reached a house that made Victoria's instincts scream. Modern, expensive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a wooded valley. The kind of property that cost more than Victoria had earned in 5 years at the Bureau. Your family owns this, she asked as they pulled up. My parents rarely use it, Derek explained. They prefer our place in the Hamptons. I come here occasionally when sourcing items in this region. Antique dealing must be more profitable than I realized. Something flickered in Derek's eyes. Family money. The Ashfords have been collectors for generations. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room, listening to the wind outside, feeling the wrongness of everything pressing against her chest. The anonymous commission, the property connected to her family, Derek's convenient appearance in her daughter's life, the timing of it all. Coincidence, she told herself. Just coincidence. But 20 years of FBI training had taught her that coincidence was the lie investigators told themselves when they couldn't see the pattern yet. She rose and walked to the window. The sky had grown dark with approaching clouds. In the distance, lightning flickered along the horizon. Storm coming. She pulled out her laptop and began searching. Samuel Hartwell. Railroad magnate. Industrial pioneer. Pillar of the community. The public records painted a portrait of a successful businessman who had built his fortune through hard work and shrewd investment. But Victoria had learned long ago that public records told only the stories powerful men wanted told. She dug deeper. Property records from the 1920s, business transactions, newspaper articles from the era. And then she found something that made her blood run cold. A brief mention in a society column from January 1926. Local businessman Samuel Hartwell to host the Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show at his private property during their winter season. The circus, known for its exotic attractions and talented performers, will resume touring in spring. But there was no mention of the circus resuming in spring. No advertisements, no reviews, no trace of them at all after January 1926. Victoria searched for an hour, then 2. The Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show had existed. Newspaper clippings proved it. They had performed across the Midwest, drawing crowds with their acrobats and animal acts and mysterious fortune teller. They had announced their winter stay at Samuel Hartwell's property. And then they had vanished. 34 performers according to the company roster Victoria found in a digitized archive. Men, women, and children, an entire community of traveling entertainers who had entered Samuel Hartwell's property in November 1925 and never emerged. The official explanation when authorities finally inquired months later was that the circus had departed suddenly, leaving substantial unpaid debts to local merchants. But there were no records of them performing anywhere after that winter. No sightings, no correspondence, nothing. 34 people didn't simply vanish, not unless someone made them vanish. Victoria stared at her screen, feeling the pieces of a terrible puzzle begin to align. Her great-grandfather, the workshop with its strange foundation, the anonymous commission that had specifically requested a Hartwell descendant to restore the property, and Derek Ashford, whose interest in the building suddenly seemed far more than professional curiosity. She needed to know more about the Ashfords, about their connection to all of this. Victoria was reaching for her phone when a flash of lightning lit the sky, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. The storm had arrived. She crossed to the window and watched as rain began to lash against the glass. Wind howled through the trees, bending branches that had stood for decades. This was no ordinary storm. This was something violent. Something that felt irrationally like a message. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "You awake?" she typed back. "Yes." "Storm keeping you up." "Something's wrong, can feel it." Victoria stared at the words. Her son had inherited more than her observational skills. He'd inherited her instincts. The gut feelings that had saved her life more times than she could count. What kind of wrong? Don't know, just wrong. Like we're not supposed to be here. Victoria looked out at the storm, at the lightning that seemed to strike closer with each flash, at the darkness that pressed against the windows like something trying to get in. "I know," she typed back. "I feel it too." "What do we do?" she thought for a long moment before answering. "We watch, we wait, and we don't trust anyone until we know what's really going on. Even Emma. Especially Emma. She's in danger, Marcus. I'm not sure from what yet, but I'm going to find out." "I'll help." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Her son, her quiet, watchful son who had learned to see the world the way she did. Who understood that love sometimes meant protection even when the person you loved couldn't see the threat. "I know you will," she replied. "Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow we start looking for answers." She set down her phone and returned to her research, but the storm made concentration impossible. Lightning struck somewhere close enough that the thunder was instantaneous, a sound like the world cracking open. Victoria pressed her hand against the cold glass, watching the violence of nature unleash itself on the Virginia mountains. Something was coming. Something that had been buried for 100 years was about to claw its way into the light, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. She thought about calling her former colleagues at the FBI. running what she'd found through official channels. But what did she really have? A century-old circus that went missing. A family property with an unusual foundation. A feeling in her gut that wouldn't quit. They'd think she was paranoid. Burned out. Seeing conspiracies where none existed. Maybe they'd be right. Or maybe for the first time in years, her instincts were leading her towards something that mattered. The storm raged on through the night. Victoria didn't sleep at all. Morning came gray and violent. The storm's fury finally spent, but its damage spread across the landscape. Trees down everywhere. Power lines hanging loose. Roads turned to rivers of mud and debris. Victoria was dressed and ready before anyone else woke. She'd made coffee, studied maps, and prepared herself for what she knew she had to do. She had to get back to that workshop, had to see what the storm had done to the building, had to understand why every instinct she possessed was screaming that the answer to everything lay beneath that northwest corner. Marcus appeared first, looking as sleep-deprived as his mother. "Did you find anything?" he asked quietly. "The Sterling brothers' circus. They wintered at Samuel Hartwell's property in 1926. Then they disappeared, all 34 of them." Marcus processed this. Disappeared? How? That's what I intend to find out. You think great-great-grandpa Samuel had something to do with it? I think there's a reason our family never talked about him. I think there's a reason someone anonymously hired me to restore that specific building. And I think Derek Ashford knows more than he's telling us. Marcus nodded slowly. What's the plan? We go back to the workshop, we investigate the foundation, and we don't let Derek out of our sight. What about Emma? Victoria paused. This was the hardest part. We protect her, even if she doesn't want to be protected, even if she hates us for it. She won't hate us. She might, for a while. Victoria met her son's eyes. But she'll be alive to hate us. That's what matters. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking remarkably put together despite the night's chaos. Good morning. Sleep well? Not particularly, Victoria said. The storm kept me up. Yes, quite the tempest. He poured himself coffee, moving through the kitchen, with the ease of someone who'd spent considerable time in this house. I took a drive earlier to check on the roads. The route to the workshop is passable, though barely, and there's quite a spectacular sight waiting for us. What kind of sight? Derek's eyes gleamed with something Victoria couldn't identify. I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. An hour later, standing at the edge of a massive crater where a century-old oak had been ripped from the earth. Victoria understood. The tree had been struck by lightning and toppled, its root system torn from the ground like a wound in the earth itself. The crater it left was at least 10 feet deep and twice as wide, and at the bottom, exposed like a secret forced into daylight stone stairs, descended into darkness. Oh my God, Emma breathed. Marcus moved forward, but Victoria caught his arm. Nobody moves until I say so. Her voice had shifted into the tone she'd used at crime scenes. Calm, controlled, absolutely certain. Derek stepped back from the edge. I was just getting a better look. Step back. Something in her voice made him comply, though his expression showed resentment at being ordered. Victoria approached the crater, carefully testing each step. The earth was soft from the storm, unstable in places, but the stone stairs looked solid, ancient, built to last, built to be hidden. What is this? Emma asked. Some kind of root cellar? No. Victoria crouched at the edge, studying the construction. Root cellars don't have stairs this wide, or stonework this elaborate. This was meant for heavy traffic, people coming and going regularly. An underground storage facility, hushed, Derek suggested, his voice casual, but Victoria caught the tension underneath. Maybe. She stood. I'm going down to look. Is that safe? Emma's voice held genuine concern. What if the structure is unstable? I'll be careful. Victoria pulled a flashlight from her bag. Marcus, call 911 if I'm not back in 15 minutes. I'm coming with you. No, you're staying here. Mom, that's not a request. Victoria met her son's eyes. I need you up here, watching. You understand? Marcus held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. He understood. Victoria descended the stairs, slowly testing each step before committing her weight. The stone was slick with moisture from the storm, but solid beneath her feet. Old but well constructed. Built by someone who knew what they were doing. At the bottom, a short passage led to a heavy wooden door. It stood partially open, as if the storm's violence had finally loosened whatever had held it shut for a century. Victoria pushed through the gap flashlight, cutting through darkness that had remained unbroken since before she was born, and then she stopped breathing. The underground chamber stretched before her like a buried cathedral. Massive timber beams supported a ceiling that rose 20 feet above. Dust particles danced in her flashlight beam, the first light these walls had seen in 100 years. But it wasn't the architecture that stopped her breath. It was what the chamber contained. 3 ornate circus wagons, their painted surfaces still vivid despite the decades. Gold lettering on the largest one spelled out words that made Victoria's heart hammer against her ribs. Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show, 1926. She moved deeper, her flashlight revealing more with each step. Rows of simple cots with trunks at their feet. Personal belongings arranged as if their owners had stepped away moments ago. A child's doll propped against a pillow. Hairbrushes with strands still caught in the bristles. Tin cups on makeshift tables. Not a storage facility. Not a hiding place for equipment. A tomb. Victoria's training kept her moving when every instinct screamed to run. She documented what she saw, her mind cataloging details even as her heart rejected their implications. In the medical area, she found the ledger that confirmed everything. Dr. Nathaniel Ashford, circus physician, daily record of health and treatment. Ashford, Derek's family name. Victoria's hands trembled as she opened the book. The handwriting inside was meticulous, clinical. Detailed records of symptoms, treatments, doses, and between the medical notations, other entries that painted a picture of systematic horror. February 10th, administered modified tonic to subject group A, results promising, symptoms present within 6 hours. February 12th, expanded treatment to remaining performers at SH's instruction, resistance minimal, quarantine enforced. February 15th, mortality rate accelerating, SH satisfied with progress, final phase to commence upon completion, SH Samuel Hartwell, her great-grandfather. Victoria closed the ledger, or feeling sick. The circus hadn't skipped town. They hadn't abandoned their equipment or left unpaid debts. They had been poisoned, imprisoned, left to die in this underground chamber, while 2 men, her ancestor and Derek's ancestor, stole everything they had and built fortunes on their graves. "Mom," Marcus's voice echoed down the stairs, tight with worry. "It's been 10 minutes." Victoria forced herself to move, to breathe, to function despite the horror pressing against her mind. "I'm coming up," she called. "I found it." Found what? Victoria looked around the chamber one last time. At the wagons, at the cots, at the personal belongings of 34 people who had trusted the wrong men and paid with their lives. "Everything," she whispered. "I found everything." She emerged from the underground chamber into gray morning light that seemed too bright after the darkness below. Emma and Marcus rushed toward her, but it was Derek she watched. His expression as she climbed those stone stairs, flashlight still in hand, face pale with what she'd discovered. He knew. She could see it in his eyes. The recognition. The calculation. The briefest flicker of something that might have been panic before his mask of charm settled back into place. "Well?" he asked. "What's down there?" "A circus," Victoria said flatly. "The Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show. Everything they owned. Everything they were." "That's extraordinary." Derek's voice held perfectly calibrated wonder. "A complete traveling show preserved underground for nearly a century. The historical value alone would be—" "They didn't preserve anything, Derek. They died down there. All 34 of them, poisoned and sealed in while your great-grandfather kept meticulous records of their symptoms." The words hung in the air like a blade. Emma looked between her mother and her boyfriend, confusion and the first stirrings of fear crossing her face. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Dr. Nathaniel Ashford, circus physician." Victoria held up her phone, showing the photograph she'd taken of the ledger. "The same Ashford family that Derek here claims has been collecting antiques for generations, though I suspect collecting is a generous term for what they actually did." Derek's charm finally cracked. For just a moment, Victoria saw the real man beneath. Cold, calculating, furious at being exposed. Then the mask returned, and he laughed. "Victoria, I understand this must be shocking, finding evidence of historical crimes connected to your own family. But surely you're not suggesting that I had anything to do with events that occurred 50 years before I was born. I'm suggesting you knew exactly what was down there. I'm suggesting that's why you pursued my daughter. Why you conveniently appeared in her life 8 months ago. Why you just happened to have a family property near the exact workshop that's been hiding your ancestors' victims. That's absurd. I met Emma at a gallery opening. Our relationship developed naturally. Nothing about you is natural. Victoria stepped closer, and something in her stance made Derek take a half step back. I spent 20 years hunting predators, Derek. I know what they look like, I know how they operate, and I know when I'm being played. Mom, stop it. Emma's voice shook, but whether from anger or dawning realization, Victoria couldn't tell. You're being paranoid. Derek loves me. He's not some kind of criminal. Then why did he fly across an ocean to help with a building restoration he has no expertise in? Why does he have a vacation home within driving distance of a property his ancestor helped use for mass murder? Why has he been photographing everything despite my explicit instructions not to? Each question landed like a blow. Victoria watched Emma's certainty waver, watched the first cracks appear in the fairy tale her daughter had constructed around her relationship. Derek saw it too. Emma, darling, you can't possibly believe these accusations. Your mother is clearly projecting her own family's guilt onto me. It's understandable given what she's just discovered about Samuel Hartwell, but it's not fair. Then explain it. Victoria's voice cut through his smooth deflection. Explain the coincidences, all of them. There's nothing to explain. The Ashford name is common. If my ancestor was involved in this tragedy, I had no knowledge of it, and my relationship with Emma has nothing to do with century-old crimes. Prove it. How exactly would you like me to prove a negative? By leaving, right now? If you have nothing to hide, then walk away. Give us space to process what's happened here. Come back in a week, a month, and we can discuss this calmly. Derek's jaw tightened. I'm not going anywhere. Why not, if you love Emma like you claim her well-being should matter more than your desire to be here? I do love Emma, and I won't abandon her to deal with this alone just because her mother has decided to treat me like a suspect. Then give me your phone. The request caught him off guard. What? Your phone. The one you've been using to photograph everything in that workshop despite being asked not to. Give it to me. Let me see what you've been documenting. For a long moment, nobody moved. The morning air felt electric, charged with tensions that had been building since Derek first shook Victoria's hand 8 months ago. Then Derek smiled, but this time there was no warmth in it at all. I don't think so. Why not? Because I don't answer to you, Victoria. You're not FBI anymore. You're not law enforcement. You're just a bitter divorced woman who's never approved of her daughter's choices, and now you've found what you think is evidence to justify your paranoia. Derek, Emma's voice was small, uncertain. Maybe you should just show her, if there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong, but I refuse to be treated like a criminal by someone who has no authority and no grounds for suspicion beyond her own inability to accept that her daughter found happiness. Victoria saw her opening and took it. No grounds. Your great-grandfather's name is in that ledger, Derek. His handwriting, his detailed records of poisoning 34 people. And you expect me to believe that's coincidence? I expect you to believe that the sins of ancestors don't transfer to their descendants, unless you're willing to accept responsibility for what Samuel Hartwell did down there. I'm willing to acknowledge it, to investigate it, to shine light on it instead of hiding it. Are you? Silence stretched between them. Then Derek's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and Victoria caught a flicker of something crossing his face. Relief confirmation. I need to take this. He stepped away, turning his back. Victoria moved instantly. Marcus, take Emma to the car, now. Mom, what are you? Now. Something in Victoria's voice cut through Emma's resistance. Marcus grabbed his sister's arm and pulled her toward the truck. Vic. Derek had turned back, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp with warning. What do you think you're doing? Protecting my daughter. From what? From you. She reached the truck just as Marcus was helping Emma into the back seat. Victoria climbed behind the wheel, started the engine, and threw the vehicle into gear before Derek could reach them. In the rearview mirror, she saw him standing in the driveway of that crumbling workshop phone still pressed to his ear, watching them flee. He wasn't running after them. He wasn't panicking. He was smiling. And Victoria realized with horrible certainty that whatever trap had been set, they hadn't escaped it. They'd just moved deeper into it. Mom, what the hell is going on? Emma's voice rose with fear and confusion. Why are we running? What did you find down there? Evidence. Victoria kept her eyes on the road, navigating the storm-damaged terrain at speeds that bordered on reckless. Evidence of murder, Emma. Mass murder. Our great-great-grandfather and Derek's great-grandfather poisoned 34 people and sealed them underground to steal their belongings. That's insane. It's documented in Dr. Ashford's own handwriting, detailed records of what he gave them, when he gave it, how quickly they died. That doesn't mean Derek knew about it. People aren't responsible for what their ancestors did 100 years ago. You're right, they're not. Victoria swerved around a fallen branch. But Derek didn't just stumble into your life, Emma. He sought you out. He researched our family. He knew about this property, about the workshop, about the commission I received. Everything that's happened in the last 8 months has been orchestrated. Emma fell silent. In the rearview mirror, Victoria could see her daughter's face. The fear, the doubt, the desperate desire to believe that love was real even when evidence suggested otherwise. Victoria knew that feeling. She'd experienced it herself years ago when she first started noticing things about Richard that didn't add up. Small lies, unexplained absences, the gradual erosion of trust that had eventually dissolved their marriage. But Richard's secrets had been ordinary, human, the kind of betrayals that happened in countless relationships. Derek's secrets were something else entirely. "We need to go to the police," Marcus said from the passenger seat. "Show them what you found. And tell them that I discovered century-old crimes, and my daughter's boyfriend might be descended from one of the perpetrators. They'll think I'm crazy." "Then what do we do?" Victoria gripped the steering wheel, mind racing through options. In the old days, she would have had resources, colleagues, the full weight of the FBI behind her. Now she had nothing but her instincts, her children, and a growing certainty that they had stumbled into something far larger than a historical crime. "We find out who hired me for this job, the anonymous client. Someone knew what was buried under that workshop, and they specifically wanted a Hartwell to find it. Why? I don't know, but whoever they are, they have answers we need." Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Victoria answered on speaker. "Hello? Mrs. Hartwell." A woman's voice, elderly but sharp. "My name is Eleanor Sterling-Martinez. I believe you've just discovered something that's been lost for a very long time." Victoria's breath caught. "Sterling, as in?" "The Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show. Yes, my grandmother was one of the performers." A pause. "One of the victims. I've been searching for them my entire life, Mrs. Hartwell, and now finally, thanks to you, I can give them a proper burial." "You hired me. You're the anonymous client." "I needed a Hartwell to find what a Hartwell buried. It seemed fitting." Another pause. "I also need to warn you. Derek Ashford is more dangerous than you know. His family has been searching for the Sterling collection for 3 generations, and they will do anything to claim what they believe belongs to them." "What's the Sterling collection? Evidence, documentation, proof of what really happened in that underground chamber. My grandmother escaped, Mrs. Hartwell. She was the only one, and she spent the rest of her life gathering everything she could to expose the men who murdered her family." "She escaped?" Victoria's mind reeled. "There's a survivor's account. More than that, there are names, dates, details that would destroy the Ashford and Hartwell legacies if they became public. The Ashfords have been trying to suppress that evidence for a century, and now that you've found the chamber, Derek will stop at nothing to ensure that evidence never sees the light of day. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting, Mrs. Hartwell, that you're not just dealing with a man who wanted to steal artifacts. You're dealing with a man who was raised to believe his family's reputation is worth killing for." Victoria looked at her children, at Emma, whose face had gone white, at Marcus, whose eyes held the same grim understanding she felt. "Where are you?" Victoria asked. "Alexandria. I'm too old to travel, but I have everything my grandmother collected, everything Derek Ashford is desperately trying to find." "I'm coming to you." "I hoped you would say that, but be careful, Mrs. Hartwell. The Ashfords have resources, connections. They've been preparing for this moment for generations, and they know exactly where you are." The call ended. Victoria looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind them was empty, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. "Mom?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "What did Derek tell me that wasn't a lie?" Victoria wished she had a comforting answer, something that would ease her daughter's pain, but she had learned long ago that truth, however brutal, was better than the alternatives. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe his feelings for you were real. Maybe some part of him genuinely cared. But nothing he did was by accident. Nothing was coincidence, and whatever he felt, it wasn't enough to stop him from using you." Emma closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek. Marcus reached back and took his sister's hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Victoria pressed the accelerator, pushing the truck toward Alexandria and the woman who held the answers they desperately needed. Behind them, invisible but closing, Derek Ashford was already making plans. The game had changed, the stakes had risen, and the century-old secret that had been buried beneath Samuel Hartwell's workshop was finally irrevocably clawing its way into the light. Victoria drove for 3 hours without stopping. The route took them through storm-damaged countryside, past emergency crews clearing debris, past small towns that looked like they'd been shaken by a giant's hand. Nature's violence had reshaped the landscape overnight, but it was the violence of men that occupied Victoria's thoughts. Eleanor Sterling-Martinez lived in a modest apartment complex in Alexandria, the kind of building that blended into its surroundings so completely you could drive past it 100 times without noticing. Victoria parked in the visitor lot and sat for a moment scanning the area. Old habits. "Is this it?" Emma asked. Her voice was flat, drained of the emotion that had marked the first hours of their flight. "This is it. What do you expect to find? Answers. Maybe evidence we can take to authorities. Maybe just understanding of what we're really dealing with." They walked to the building's entrance. A security camera tracked their movement, and Victoria noted it was newer than the building itself. Someone had invested in surveillance recently. Eleanor buzzed them up. The apartment was small but meticulously organized. Books lined every wall. File boxes occupied most of the available floor space, and in a wheelchair by the window sat a woman who looked like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Eleanor Sterling-Martinez was 90 years old. Her body was frail, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes were sharp as knives, and they locked onto Victoria with an intensity that made the former agent's instincts flare. "Mrs. Hartwell." Eleanor's voice was stronger than expected. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen 34 of them, and their belongings, and the records of how they died." "Please sit. We have much to discuss." They sat. Eleanor studied each of them, in turn, her gaze lingering longest on Emma. "You're the one Derek Ashford targeted. I'm sorry. He's very good at what he does. Generations of practice." "How do you know about Derek?" Victoria asked. "I've been watching the Ashford family for 50 years, Mrs. Hartwell. Just as they've been watching for any sign of the Sterling collection, we've been playing a game neither side could win. Until now." "What changed?" "The workshop. When I discovered it was scheduled for demolition, I knew I had one final chance. I hired investigators to find out who owned it, traced the property through a century of transfers and shell companies, and discovered that it had been quietly held by Ashford family interests for decades." "Wait." Victoria leaned forward. "The Ashfords owned the property. Through intermediaries. They purchased it in the 1970s when the original Hartwell holdings were broken up. They've owned it ever since, but they never found what was hidden there." Eleanor smiled grimly. "My grandmother was clever. She didn't just escape. She made sure the entrance was concealed before she fled. The Ashfords searched for decades. They even had the building partially excavated in 1983. Found nothing. So you hired me to find what they couldn't." "Shit." "I hired a Hartwell to expose what a Hartwell buried. I hired someone with the skills to investigate the ethics, to tell the truth, and the personal connection to make the story impossible to ignore." Eleanor's eyes held Victoria's. "I hired you because you were the right person to bring justice to people who died a century before you were born." Emma spoke for the first time since entering the apartment. "Why couldn't your grandmother get justice herself? She escaped. She had evidence. Why didn't anyone believe her?" Eleanor's expression softened with old pain. "My grandmother, Luna Sterling, was 16 years old in 1926. A circus performer, an immigrant. A young woman alone in a world that didn't value any of those things. She went to newspapers. They called her hysterical. She went to police. They threatened to have her committed. She had no power, no connections, no way to fight men like Samuel Hartwell and Nathaniel Ashford. So she just gave up. She adapted. She married a kind man who believed her story. She had children. She passed down everything she knew and everything she documented. And she spent her entire life gathering more evidence, waiting for the day when the world might finally be ready to listen." Eleanor gestured toward the file boxes that filled her apartment. "This is Luna's legacy. 70 years of research, documentation of how the Hartwell and Ashford families built their fortunes on stolen lives. Records of the circus performers, their backgrounds, their families. Proof of what was done to them. And Derek wants to destroy it. Derek wants to claim it. The Ashfords have always believed they're entitled to everything the circus owned. Medical specimens, historical artifacts, personal valuables. They see it as property their ancestor rightfully acquired." Eleanor's voice hardened. "They don't see 34 human beings who were murdered for profit. They see an inheritance that was unjustly denied." Marcus, who had been silent since arriving, finally spoke. What were the medical specimens? What was so valuable that someone would kill for it? Eleanor wheeled herself to one of the file boxes and extracted a folder. The Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show was famous for its sideshow attractions, people with unusual physical characteristics, medical anomalies that drew crowds willing to pay for the spectacle. Her voice carried old bitterness. In 1926, such people were often exploited, displayed like objects. But the Sterling Circus was different. They were family, protected, treated with dignity by performers who understood what it meant to be outsiders. She opened the folder, revealing photographs that made Emma gasp. Dr. Nathaniel Ashford saw them differently. He saw specimens, subjects for study. He cultivated a relationship with the circus, offered free medical care, and all the while he was documenting what he called their scientific value. When Samuel Hartwell proposed a way to acquire everything the circus owned, Ashford was eager to participate. They planned it from the beginning, Victoria said. It wasn't opportunistic. It was premeditated murder. 34 people, poisoned slowly over weeks, imprisoned underground when they became too weak to resist, sealed in to die while Hartwell and Ashford divided the spoils above. Eleanor closed the folder. My grandmother watched it happen. She documented every detail before she escaped, and she spent the rest of her life ensuring that someday, somehow, the truth would emerge. Victoria's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I know where you are. We should talk. Privately. Derek. She showed the message to Eleanor, who nodded. He tracked you. Of course he did. The Ashfords have resources most people can't imagine. What do I do? You have two choices, Mrs. Hartwell. You can run, take your children somewhere safe, and hope Derek Ashford decides the risk of pursuing you isn't worth the potential exposure. And the other choice. You can end this, bring the evidence to light, give proper burial to the people who died in that chamber, and destroy the legacy that the Hartwell and Ashford families have protected for a century. Even if it means destroying my own family's reputation. Eleanor's eyes held something like respect. Reputation built on murder isn't worth protecting. Luna Sterling taught me that. The question is whether you believe it too. Victoria looked at her children. At Emma, whose world had shattered twice in one day. At Marcus, whose quiet strength had never wavered. They were watching her, waiting to see what kind of person their mother really was. Victoria thought about her years at the FBI, the cases she'd worked, the victims she'd fought for. The principles she'd held even when holding them cost her everything. She thought about the 34 people sealed in that underground chamber, the children among them, the lives cut short by greed and callousness. She thought about the kind of legacy she wanted to leave her own children. I'm not going to run, she said quietly. I'm going to finish what your grandmother started. Eleanor's weathered face split into a smile. Good. Then let me tell you what you're really dealing with, and how we're going to bring them down. Victoria listened as Eleanor outlined a plan that had been decades in the making. Evidence, testimony, documentation that would withstand any legal challenge. Outside the apartment window, the sun was setting on a day that had changed everything. And somewhere in the growing darkness, Derek Ashford was preparing to make his move. 3 hours had passed since they arrived at Eleanor's apartment. The old woman had shown them everything. Photographs of circus performers smiling in front of painted wagons. Letters written in faded ink from family members who never saw their loved ones again. And most damning of all, Luna Sterling's own journal filled with sketches of the underground chamber and detailed accounts of what she witnessed before her escape. Victoria's phone buzzed again, another message from Derek. Your daughter deserves to know the truth about why you really left the FBI. Should I tell her, or will you... Victoria's blood ran cold. She looked at Emma, who was studying one of Luna's sketches with red-rimmed eyes. Mom, Marcus had seen her expression change. What is it? Nothing. Just Derek trying to get under my skin. But it wasn't nothing, and from the way Marcus watched her, he knew it too. Eleanor wheeled herself closer. What did he say? Victoria showed her the message. The old woman's eyes narrowed. He's probing, looking for leverage. The Ashfords always research their targets thoroughly. She looked at Victoria with uncomfortable directness. Is there something he could use against you? Victoria's jaw tightened. 20 years of secrets pressed against her chest, or her chest demanding release. There's always something, she said quietly. Everyone has something. Mom? Emma had looked up from the sketches. What is he talking about? Why did you really leave the FBI? I burned out. I told you that. You told me a lot of things. Right now I'm having trouble knowing which ones were true. The accusation stung because it was fair. Victoria had spent years protecting her children from the darkness of her work, from the cases that haunted her, from the choices she'd made in pursuit of justice. Some of those choices had crossed lines. There was a case, Victoria said slowly. 5 years ago, a trafficking ring operating out of Baltimore. We knew who was running it. We had evidence, but the legal channels were blocked. The man had connections, political protection. What did you do? Victoria met her daughter's eyes. I made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. What does that mean? It means I did what needed to be done. And then I resigned before anyone could ask questions I didn't want to answer. Silence filled the apartment. Emma's face cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. Did you kill someone? No, but I destroyed someone, his reputation, his business, his family. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I leaked information to people who would use it. I broke every rule I'd sworn to uphold, and I'd do it again. Why? Because he was selling children, Emma, 14 and 15-year-old girls, and the system that was supposed to stop him was protecting him instead. Victoria's eyes burned with old fury. Sometimes justice requires stepping outside the lines. I learned that lesson, and I've lived with it ever since. Eleanor spoke into the heavy silence. The Ashfords would have found this. They research everyone who gets close to their interests. Derek was probably planning to use it against you eventually. Use it how? Blackmail, exposure, leverage to ensure your cooperation or silence. Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact. The question is whether you're willing to let him. Victoria looked at her children, at Emma, whose trust had been shattered twice in one day, at Marcus, whose faith in his mother had just been tested in ways she'd never intended. No, she said. I'm done being afraid of the truth. Her phone buzzed again. Last chance, Victoria. Meet me, alone, or I start making calls. Victoria typed back without hesitation. Tell me where. The response came immediately. The workshop, midnight. Come alone or your daughter learns exactly what kind of mother she has. Victoria showed the message to Eleanor. It's a trap, Marcus said instantly. You can't go. I have to. If I don't, he'll destroy me. And then everything we found dies with my credibility. Then I'm coming with you. No. Mom. I said no. Victoria's voice carried the authority of 2 decades in law enforcement. I need you here, protecting your sister, protecting Eleanor and everything she's collected. What if he hurts you? He won't. Not yet. He needs something from me first. I just have to figure out what. Emma stood abruptly. This is insane. You're going to meet the man who used me to get to you, the man whose family murdered 34 people alone at midnight. Yes. Why? Because I'm not the same woman I was 20 years ago, Emma. I'm not the agent who followed rules and trusted systems. I'm someone who learned that sometimes you have to face monsters directly. Victoria crossed to her daughter and took her hands. And because I will not let him use you against me, not anymore. I don't understand. You don't have to. You just have to trust me. Emma's eyes searched her mother's face. How can I trust you? You just told me you destroyed someone's life outside the law. You just told me there are things about you I never knew. Yes, and I told you those things because you deserve the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me look like less than the mother you thought you had. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the same person I've always been. You're just seeing all of me now. Victoria pulled her daughter into an embrace. I love you. I will protect you. And when this is over, we'll have all the time in the world to rebuild whatever trust I've broken. What if you don't come back? Then Marcus knows what to do. Eleanor has copies of everything. The truth will come out whether I'm there to tell it or not. She held Emma for a long moment, memorizing the feeling. Then she stepped back and turned to her son. Marcus, you're in charge until I return. I should be going with you. You should be doing exactly what I ask, because I need to know my children are safe. Can you give me that? Marcus held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. Thank you. Victoria checked her watch. 8 hours until midnight. Eleanor, I need everything you have on Derek specifically, his background, his patterns, his weaknesses. I'll pull the files. And I need to make some calls, old contacts, people who might still owe me favors. You're planning something. I'm preparing for every possibility. Victoria's voice hardened. Derek Ashford thinks he's in control. He's about to learn otherwise. The hours that followed were a blur of preparation. Victoria called former colleagues, careful to use burner phones Eleanor provided. She reviewed files on the Ashford family, building a profile of the man she would face. She studied maps of the workshop and its surroundings, identifying escape routes and tactical advantages. And she thought about what Derek really wanted. Not just the artifacts, not just the evidence Eleanor had collected. Something else, something personal. At 10 o'clock, Marcus found her reviewing Luna Sterling's journal for the third time. "You should rest. You've been going non-stop since yesterday." "I'll rest when this is over." That's what Dad used to say, right before every deployment. Victoria looked up. Richard, her ex-husband, Army Special Forces before he retired. Another person who'd sacrificed everything for duty. "How is your father?" "He's worried about you. I called him while you were on the phone." "You shouldn't have done that." "He needed to know, and honestly, I needed to hear his voice." Marcus sat down across from her. "He said to tell you something." "What?" "He said trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that the person across from you is always more afraid than they look." Victoria felt tears prick her eye. 22 years of marriage, and Richard still knew exactly what she needed to hear. "Your father is a good man." "I know. That's why I don't understand why you couldn't make it work." "Because being good isn't always enough. Because the job took everything I had. Because by the time I realized what I was losing, it was already gone." Victoria closed the journal. "I have a lot of regrets, Marcus. Your father isn't one of them. Neither are you or your sister." "What are your regrets?" "The cases I couldn't solve. The victims I couldn't save. The lines I crossed when crossing them seemed like the only option." She met her son's eyes. "And the years I spent so focused on other people's monsters that I didn't see the ones circling my own family." Derek? Derek, and whatever he represents, whatever his family has been building for 3 generations. Victoria stood. "I'm going to end it tonight, one way or another." "What if you can't?" "Then you finish what I started. You take Eleanor's evidence to the FBI. You tell them everything, and you make sure those 34 people finally get the justice they deserve. And Emma? Take care of her. She's going to need you, whatever happens." Marcus stood and hugged his mother. It was awkward the way hugs between teenage boys and their mothers often are, but Victoria held on anyway, memorizing this too. "I love you," she said. "I love you too, Mom. Come back safe." "I'll try." At 11:30, Victoria left the apartment. She drove through empty streets, watching her mirrors for any sign of surveillance. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead, the kind of sky that made human conflicts seem small and temporary. But the conflict she was driving toward was neither small nor temporary. It was 100 years in the making. And tonight, one way or another, it would reach its conclusion. The workshop looked different at midnight. Without the gray daylight to soften its edges, the building seemed to crouch against the hillside like something waiting to spring. The crater left by the fallen oak was a wound in the earth. The exposed stone stairs descending into darkness that seemed absolute. Derek's Mercedes was parked near the entrance. He stood beside it, hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a man waiting for a business appointment. Victoria parked her truck and stepped out. The night air was cold, carrying the smell of rain-soaked earth and something else. Something older. Something that might have been decay. "Victoria," Derek's voice carried across the distance between them. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You knew I would." "I hoped. There's a difference." He gestured toward the workshop. "Shall we talk inside? It's cold out here." "We can talk right where we are." "As you prefer." Derek leaned against his car, the picture of casual confidence. "You've been busy." "Eleanor Sterling-Martinez. Quite a find. I've been looking for her for years." "She found me." "Yes, she has a talent for that. Manipulating people into doing her bidding while convincing them it was their idea." His smile was sharp. "Sound familiar?" "What do you want, Derek?" "What I've always wanted. What my family has pursued for 3 generations. Justice." Victoria laughed despite herself. "Justice? And you call murder and theft justice? I call it reclamation. My great-grandfather was a physician, a scientist. He saw value in things that others dismissed as freakish or grotesque. He offered the Sterling Circus medical care protection a future beyond the degradation of sideshow tents." Derek's voice hardened. "And they rejected him, mocked him, threatened to expose his interest in their performers as something perverse. So he killed them. So he took what should have been freely given, the specimens, the documentation, The artifacts that would have rotted in some field when the circus finally collapsed. Derek pushed off from his car and took a step toward Victoria. My great-grandfather was ahead of his time. He understood that certain people, certain conditions held scientific value that transcended individual lives. He was a visionary. He was a monster. He was human, just like Samuel Hartwell, just like you. Another step closer. I know what you did in Baltimore, Victoria, the trafficking case, the man you destroyed. Do you really think your hands are cleaner than my great-grandfather's? I never killed innocent people. Neither did he. The circus performers weren't innocent. They harbored fugitives. They practiced fortune-telling and other frauds. They exploited their own members by displaying their physical differences for profit. Derek was close now, close enough that Victoria could see the gleam of conviction in his eyes. My great-grandfather freed them from that exploitation, gave their conditions scientific meaning instead of carnival spectacle. You actually believe that? I believe in legacy, Victoria, the same legacy your great-grandfather believed in when he helped build this workshop, this chamber, this monument to pragmatic necessity. Derek's voice dropped. The question is what you believe, and what you're willing to do about it. I believe 34 people were murdered for profit. I believe their belongings were stolen and their existence erased. I believe your family and mine have been living on blood money for a century. Victoria's voice was steady. And I believe it ends tonight. How you have Eleanor's files. I have resources that make her collection look like a garage sale. You have your principles. I have lawyers' connections and the patience of 3 generations. Derek smiled. You can't win this fight, Victoria, but you can negotiate an ending that benefits everyone. What kind of ending? Eleanor dies soon. She's 90 years old with a heart condition she thinks no one knows about. When she's gone, her collection will need a home. I'm prepared to offer a substantial sum for it, enough to fund your children's education, enough to ensure your comfortable retirement, enough to make all of this unpleasantness disappear. You want me to sell you the evidence? I want you to accept reality. The circus performers are dead. They've been dead for a century. Nothing you do will bring them back, but you can ensure your family's future while honoring their memory in whatever private way you choose. And if I refuse, Derek's smile faded. Then I make calls. Your FBI history becomes public. Your methods in Baltimore become front-page news. Your daughter learns that the mother she trusted was willing to destroy lives outside the law when it suited her. He paused. And your son learns that his quiet, observant nature reminds you so much of yourself because you've always suspected he inherited more than your investigative skills. He inherited your capacity for darkness, too. Victoria felt the words like physical blows, not because they were false, but because they were true. She had worried about Marcus, about the way he watched people, about the detachment she sometimes saw in his eyes. You researched my family. I research everyone. It's how I survive. Derek extended his hand. Take the deal, Victoria. Walk away with your dignity and your secrets intact. Let the dead stay buried. Victoria looked at his hand, at the manicured fingers of a man who had never done an honest day's work in his life, at the confidence of someone who believed money and power could solve any problem. Then she looked past him toward the workshop, toward the crater, toward the stone stairs descending into darkness where 34 people had died, screaming for help that never came. No. Derek's hand dropped. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Victoria met his eyes. I'm not going to sell you the evidence. I'm not going to hide what your family did. And I'm not going to let you threaten my children ever again. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. That's what your great-grandfather didn't understand. That's what Samuel Hartwell didn't understand. Those circus performers had choices too. They chose to trust. They chose to believe that human decency would protect them. Victoria's voice hardened. They were wrong. But their choice wasn't the problem. The problem was the men who betrayed that trust. Derek's expression shifted. The charm was gone now, replaced by something cold and calculating. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but I'll be able to live with myself. Can you say the same? For a long moment they stood in silence. The night pressed around them, heavy with unspoken threats and century-old grief. Then Derek smiled again, but this time there was nothing human in it. I gave you a chance, Victoria. Remember that. When everything falls apart, remember that I tried to be reasonable. He turned and walked toward his car. Derek? He paused. Hand on the door handle. Stay away from my daughter. Stay away from my son. If I see you near them again, I won't be reasonable either." Derek laughed softly. "Threats, Victoria, from a woman who just turned down the only deal that could have saved her family." He opened the car door. "You have no idea what's coming, but you will, very soon." He drove away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. Victoria stood alone in front of the workshop, heart-pounding, mind racing. She had called his bluff. She had refused his deal. She had drawn a line in the sand. Now she had to figure out how to defend it. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Everything okay?" she typed back. "Coming home, we need to talk." Then she turned and looked one more time at the crater, at the exposed stairs, at the darkness below where so many had suffered and died. "I'm going to finish this," she said quietly to no one and everyone. "I promise." She got in her truck and drove away, but she knew with the certainty of 20 years hunting predators that Derek Ashford was already planning his next move, and whatever it would be worse than anything she could imagine. The drive back to Alexandria took 2 hours. Victoria used every minute to think. Derek's threat about Baltimore was real. If those details became public, her credibility would be destroyed. Everything she said about the circus murders would be dismissed as the ravings of a disgraced agent trying to distract from her own crimes. She needed to get ahead of it. Control the narrative before Derek could weaponize it. When she arrived at Eleanor's apartment, Marcus was waiting at the door. "You're back." Relief flooded his voice. "I was starting to worry." "I'm fine. Where's Emma?" "Sleeping, or trying to. She's been crying on and off since you left." Victoria's heart clenched. "I need to talk to her." "In the morning. She needs rest." Marcus followed his mother inside. What happened? Victoria told him everything. Derek's offer, his threats, the choice she'd made. Marcus listened without interruption. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" "He's going to expose me, Marcus. Everything I worked for, everything I built, it's going to be destroyed." "So what your reputation isn't worth 34 lives." Marcus's voice was steady, mature beyond his years. "You taught me that. When I was 12 and I lied about breaking the neighbor's window, you made me tell the truth even though it meant paying for the damage out of my allowance for 6 months. That was different. Was it, you said the truth matters more than comfort. You said integrity means doing the right thing even when it costs you." He met her eyes. "Did you mean it, or was that just something you told your kids?" Victoria felt tears threatening. "I meant it." "Then stop second-guessing yourself. Derek Ashford is a predator. His family has been protecting murderers for a century. Whatever he throws at you, we'll face it together." "When did you get so wise?" "I had good teachers." Marcus almost smiled. "Flawed teachers, maybe, but good ones." Victoria hugged her son, letting herself draw strength from his certainty. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed that." "I know. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we plan our next move." But sleep wouldn't come. Victoria lay in the darkness of Eleanor's guest room, mind churning through possibilities. Derek would act soon. He wasn't the type to wait when a threat remained active. She needed allies, resources, a way to protect her family while pursuing justice for people who had been dead for a century. At 4 a.m, she made a decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. It rang 3 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello?" "Richard, it's Victoria. I need your help." Silence. Then her ex-husband's voice, instantly alert. "What's wrong? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine, but we're in trouble. All of us, and I don't know who else to call." She told him everything, the commission, the workshop, the underground chamber, Derek, the century-old murders, and the evidence that could expose them. Richard listened without interrupting the way he always had during their marriage. It was one of the things she'd loved about him, one of the things she'd lost. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'll be there by noon," he said finally. "Richard, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Those are my children, too. And whatever happened between us, I'm not going to let some trust fund psychopath threaten them." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We'll figure this out together, Vic, like we should have done years ago." The line went dead. Victoria set down the phone, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dawn was breaking over Alexandria when Emma emerged from the bedroom. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying. Hair tangled from a restless night, but there was something else in her expression, something harder, something that hadn't been there before. "I heard you on the phone," she said quietly. "Dad's coming." "Yes?" Emma nodded. "Good. We're going to need all the help we can get." Emma, I'm sorry. About Derek. About everything. I know. Emma crossed to the window, looking out at the lightening sky. I've been thinking all night about Derek. About you. About the choices people make and the lies they tell themselves. And I think I understand now why you never liked him, why your instincts were screaming even when you couldn't explain it. Emma turned to face her mother. You've spent your whole life studying predators. You know what they look like, how they operate, how they hide behind charm and kindness. You saw Derek clearly from the beginning. I was the one who was blind. You weren't blind. You were in love. Same thing, apparently. Emma's laugh was bitter. I keep thinking about those circus performers. They trusted Samuel Hartwell, too. They thought he was helping them, protecting them, and the whole time he was planning to kill them. Emma, I'm not comparing Derek to a mass murderer, but the principle is the same, isn't it? People who want to use you always start by making you trust them. They always start by making you feel special. Victoria crossed to her daughter and took her hands. This isn't your fault. Derek targeted you specifically. He researched our family, identified you as the most vulnerable point of access, and exploited your openness and trust. That's not a character flaw. That's who you are, and it's beautiful. It's dangerous. It can be both. Victoria squeezed Emma's hands. The world needs people like you. People who believe in love and trust and human connection. The world also needs people like me who see the darkness and call it what it is. Together we balance each other out. Is that why you and Dad couldn't make it work? Too much darkness? Something like that. I brought home too many ghosts. He couldn't compete with the dead. Victoria released her daughter's hands. But that's a conversation for another time. Right now, we need to focus on surviving whatever Derek is planning. What do you think he'll do? Something dramatic. Something designed to neutralize me as a threat while claiming the evidence Eleanor has collected. Victoria's voice hardened. But he made a mistake last night. He showed me his cards. Now I know what he's afraid of, what he wants, and how far he's willing to go. That gives us an advantage. What advantage? He thinks I'm alone. He thinks he's dealing with a burned-out former agent protecting a guilty secret. Victoria smiled grimly. He has no idea that he just united the most dangerous people I know against him. Who harmed your father, for one, and some old friends from the Bureau who still owe me favors, and Eleanor, who has been preparing for this fight since before Derek was born. Is it going to be enough? I don't know, but it's more than he's expecting, and sometimes that's all you need. Eleanor emerged from her bedroom, wheeling herself with the determination of someone who had spent a lifetime refusing to surrender. I heard voices. What did I miss? Victoria filled her in quickly. The confrontation with Derek, the threats, the refusal, Richard's imminent arrival. Eleanor nodded slowly. Good. We'll need military experience if this escalates. You think it will escalate? I think the Ashfords have never been denied something they wanted. I think Derek grew up believing that money and power could solve any problem, and I think when he realizes you can't be bought or intimidated, he'll resort to more direct methods. What kind of methods? My grandmother always said Nathaniel Ashford was a coward at heart. He poisoned people because he was afraid to confront them directly. He let Samuel Hartwell do the physical work while he documented everything from a safe distance. Eleanor's eyes held old fury. Derek is the same. He won't come at you himself. He'll send others, lawyers, investigators, maybe worse. Then we need to move first. Victoria began pacing, her FBI training taking over. We need to get the evidence into official hands before Derek can suppress it. We need to establish a chain of custody that can't be broken, and we need to go public in a way that makes it impossible to discredit us. How? I have contacts at the Washington Post, investigative journalists who specialize in historical cover-ups. If we can give them exclusive access to Eleanor's files before Derek makes his move, the story becomes too big to bury. And if Derek exposes your Baltimore history first, then I get ahead of it. Tell my own story before he can twist it. Victoria stopped pacing. I'm done hiding. I'm done protecting a reputation built on silence. If the truth about me comes out, I'll face it, but I won't let Derek use it as a weapon. Eleanor smiled. Luna would have liked you. She always said the only way to fight darkness was with light. Then let's start shining. Victoria pulled out her phone. I have calls to make. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Victoria contacted Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist she'd worked with years ago on a corruption case. Sarah was skeptical at first, but as Victoria outlined what they'd found, her skepticism transformed into excitement. A century-old mass murder covered up by two prominent families with documentation from a survivor. Vic, this is Pulitzer material. It's also dangerous. The people involved have resources, and they've already made threats. All the more reason to publish quickly. Once it's out there, suppressing it becomes impossible. They arranged for Sarah to visit Eleanor's apartment that afternoon to review the evidence. Richard arrived at 11, looking like he'd driven through the night without stopping. When he saw Victoria, something complicated passed between them. Old love, old hurt, and something new. A shared purpose that transcended their history. The kids, he asked first. Safe. Scared, but safe. And this Derek person. Dangerous, connected, and very motivated to protect his family's secrets. Richard's expression hardened in a way Victoria remembered from his military days. The look he got before missions. The look that said he was ready to do whatever necessary. Then let's make sure he fails. The journalist arrived at 2 o'clock. Sarah Chen was Victoria's age, sharp-eyed and skeptical in the way good reporters needed to be. She spent 3 hours reviewing Eleanor's files, asking questions, taking photographs, and recording Eleanor's account of Luna Sterling's story. When she finished, she sat back with an expression of barely contained excitement. This is extraordinary. If it holds up to verification, and I think it will, this is going to blow up. Prominent families, historical murders, a survivor's documented account. Sarah shook her head. People have won awards for less. How quickly can you publish? I need to verify key details. Cross-reference the documents with independent sources. That takes time. We may not have time. Derek Ashford is going to move against us. How certain are you? Certain enough that I'm asking you to trust me. Publish what you can confirm quickly. Add the rest as you verify it. But get something out there now before he has a chance to bury it. Sarah considered this. 48 hours? I can have a preliminary piece ready in 48 hours. Enough to establish the basic story and create public interest. Do it. After Sarah left, Victoria gathered everyone in Eleanor's living room. Emma, Marcus, Richard, Eleanor, the people she trusted most in the world united against a common enemy. We have 48 hours before the story breaks, she said. That's 48 hours for Derek to make his move. I need everyone on high alert. What kind of move? Richard asked. I don't know. Legal action, media manipulation, maybe something more direct. Victoria looked at each of them in turn. Whatever happens, we stick together. We don't let him divide us, and we don't give up. We won't, Marcus said quietly. We've come too far, Eleanor added. Emma didn't speak, but she nodded. And that was enough. That night, Victoria allowed herself 4 hours of sleep. It was more than she'd gotten in days, but her body still felt heavy with exhaustion when her phone woke her at 3 a.m, unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello, Mrs. Hartwell, a woman's voice, young, frightened. My name is Claire Ashford. I'm Derek's sister, and I need to tell you something he's planning. Victoria sat up in bed, instantly awake. The voice on the phone trembled with genuine fear, not the calculated emotion of someone playing a role. Claire Ashford, Victoria repeated. Derek's sister. Yes. Please, I don't have much time. He's planning something terrible, and I can't let it happen. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. I know how this looks. But I've spent my entire life watching my family destroy people who got in their way. I've stayed silent because I was afraid, because I was complicit. Claire's voice cracked. I can't stay silent anymore, not about this. Victoria swung her legs out of bed, mind racing. This could be a trap, another manipulation designed to draw her out. But something in Claire's voice rang true. What is Derek planning? He's hired men, private contractors, former military. They're going to raid Eleanor Sterling's apartment tomorrow night and take everything, all the documents, all the evidence, everything. Victoria's blood ran cold. He's going to use force. He's going to make it look like a robbery, a home invasion gone wrong. The old woman dies, the files disappear, and no one ever connects it to our family. He's planning to murder Eleanor. He's planning to eliminate the threat. That's how he thinks. That's how our father taught him to think. Claire was crying now. I can't let him become what our great-grandfather was. I can't let another generation of Ashfords build their legacy on dead bodies. Victoria moved through the dark apartment, her FBI training taking over. She needed to wake the others. She needed to prepare defenses. She needed to get Eleanor somewhere safe. When tomorrow night, what time? After midnight, when the building is quiet. They're going to cut the power first, disable the security cameras, then go in. How many men from you? 4, maybe 5, all armed, all experienced. And Derek? He'll be somewhere public, establishing an alibi. He's always careful that way. Claire's voice hardened with bitter knowledge. He learned from our father. Never be present when violence happens. Always have deniability. Victoria reached Eleanor's door and knocked softly. I need more information, Claire. Entry points, timing, anything else you know. I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise me something. What? When this is over, when my brother is exposed, you have to help me disappear. The family will never forgive what I'm doing. They'll come for me the way they're coming for you. Victoria heard footsteps behind her. Richard, alert and ready hand, already reaching for the weapon he'd brought. I promise, Victoria said. Now tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Claire outlined what she knew. The contractors were a private security firm the Ashfords had used before. 4 men, military backgrounds, no official connection to the family. They would enter through the building's service entrance at approximately 2 in the morning. Their instructions were to secure all documents, eliminate any witnesses, and make it appear to be a burglary. How do you know all this? Victoria asked. Because Derek tells me things. He always has. He thinks I'm weak, loyal, too frightened of our parents to ever betray him. Claire laughed bitterly. He's half right. I am frightened, but fear isn't the same as loyalty. Why now? Why betray him over this? Because of what I found in our family archives last month. Letters from Nathaniel Ashford to his wife. Detailed accounts of what he did to those circus performers, the pleasure he took in their suffering. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. He wrote about a child, Mrs. Hartwell, a 7-year-old girl with a physical deformity. He wrote about preserving her body for study. He wrote about it like she was a specimen, not a person. Victoria felt sick. And Derek knows about these letters. Derek has read them 100 times. He considers them family heritage, proof of our ancestors' scientific importance. Claire paused. That's when I realized my brother isn't just greedy or ruthless. He's something else entirely, something broken in a way that can't be fixed. By the time the call ended, dawn was breaking over Alexandria. Victoria had filled 3 pages with notes, and her mind was racing through tactical options. Richard stood in the kitchen, coffee brewing, his expression grim. I heard most of it, he said. You believe her. I think she's genuinely terrified. Whether that terror is justified, or whether this is an elaborate trap, I can't be certain. If it's real, we have less than 24 hours to prepare for an armed assault. If it's a trap, they're expecting us to respond exactly the way we're going to respond. Either way, we can't stay here. Victoria nodded. We need to move Eleanor, get her somewhere safe, then decide how to handle the attack. Or let it happen. Victoria looked at her ex-husband sharply. What? If Derek sends armed men to raid an empty apartment, we have evidence of conspiracy, witnesses, proof that he's willing to commit violence to protect his family's secrets. Richard's military mind was working. We could set a trap of our own. That's incredibly risky. Everything about this situation is risky. The question is whether we want to play defense or offense. Eleanor's door opened. The old woman wheeled herself out, looking as if she hadn't slept at all. I heard the phone call, Tom, she said. I know what's coming. We're going to move you somewhere safe, Victoria started. No. Eleanor, these men are planning to kill you. I'm 90 years old, Victoria. I've been waiting for this fight my entire life. If the Ashfords want to come for me, let them come. Eleanor's eyes blazed with fierce determination. My grandmother escaped from that underground tomb by being brave when she had every reason to be afraid. I won't dishonor her memory by running. This isn't about honor. It's about survival. At my age, there are things more important than survival. Eleanor wheeled herself closer. I've spent 80 years gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the moment when justice might finally be possible. Now that moment is here, and you want me to hide. Victoria looked at Richard, then back at Eleanor. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we do exactly what your ex-husband proposed. We set a trap. We let Derek send his men into a situation they think they control, and we ensure that when they arrive, they find something very different from a helpless old woman and her files. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, and it's also the only way to end this permanently. Eleanor's voice hardened. If we run, Derek will keep coming. He'll never stop. The Ashfords have been hunting my family for 100 years. Running hasn't worked. Hiding hasn't worked. The only thing that will work is exposing them so completely that they can never recover. Marcus appeared in the hallway, Emma behind him. Both had clearly been awakened by the commotion. "What's going on?" Marcus asked. Victoria took a breath. "Derek is sending armed men to raid this apartment tomorrow night. They're planning to take everything and kill anyone who gets in their way." Emma's face went white. "What do we do?" "We fight back," Eleanor answered before Victoria could speak. "We prepare a welcome they're not expecting." The next 18 hours were a blur of preparation. Richard made calls to former military contacts, men who owed him favors and didn't ask questions. By noon, 3 of them had arrived at Eleanor's apartment, bringing equipment and expertise that turned the modest space into something very different. Victoria contacted Sarah Chen, accelerating the publication timeline. If something went wrong tonight, the story needed to be ready to release immediately. "I can have something online within hours if necessary," Sarah promised. "Not the full story, but enough to establish the basic facts. Enough to make suppression impossible." "Do it. Have it ready to publish the moment I give the word." Marcus helped organize Eleanor's most critical documents, creating digital copies that were uploaded to secure servers. Even if the physical files were destroyed, the evidence would survive. Emma watched all of this with a mixture of fear and something else. Something harder. Something that had been growing since she learned the truth about Derek. At 4 o'clock, she approached her mother. "I want to help." "You are helping." "I mean, really help. I want to be here when they come. I want to face them." "Absolutely not. You and Marcus are leaving at midnight. Richard arranged a safe house." "Mom?" "This isn't negotiable, Emma. I will not put my children in the line of fire." "I'm 19 years old. I'm not a child anymore. And this is my fight, too." Emma's voice shook but held steady. "Derek used me. He manipulated me. He made me feel special while planning to destroy my family. I have a right to see him face consequences." "You'll see that from a safe distance." "That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Neither is parenthood." Victoria took her daughter's hands. "I know you want to be brave. I know you want to prove something to yourself. But the bravest thing you can do right now is stay safe so I can focus on what needs to happen without worrying about you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "What if something goes wrong? What if I never see you again?" "Then you'll carry on. You'll tell the story. You'll make sure those 34 people are never forgotten." Victoria pulled her daughter into an embrace. "But nothing is going to go wrong. I've spent 20 years handling dangerous situations. This is what I was trained for." "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." At 10 o'clock, Marcus and Emma left with one of Richard's contacts, heading to a secure location an hour outside the city. Victoria watched them go, feeling her heart tear in two. "They'll be fine," Richard said quietly. "Mike is the best. He'll keep them safe." "I know. That doesn't make it easier." "Nothing about this is easy." Richard checked his weapon, a gesture so familiar it sent Victoria back through years of memory. "You ready?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." "That's always been your strength, Vic. Doing the hard thing when it needs to be done." She looked at him, this man she'd married and divorced, loved and failed, abandoned and been abandoned by. "Richard, whatever happens tonight, I need you to know something." "What?" "I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to show it." Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched her face, a gesture of tenderness that belonged to another time. "I know," he said. "I've always known." They didn't say anything more. There was nothing more that needed saying. At midnight, Eleanor's apartment was transformed. Richard's contacts had set up surveillance equipment covering every approach to the building. They had positioned themselves in strategic locations, ready to respond the moment the intruders made their move. Victoria and Richard remained in the apartment with Eleanor, who had refused to leave despite everyone's objections. "My grandmother watched her family die in that underground chamber," Eleanor said when Victoria tried once more to convince her. "She spent the rest of her life carrying that burden. If I die tonight, I die fighting for justice. That's more than most people ever get." "You're not going to die tonight." "Perhaps not. But if I do, it won't be in vain?" Eleanor wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Do you know what my grandmother told me the last time I saw her? I was 15 years old. She was dying of cancer. She knew she wouldn't live to see justice done." "What did she say?" "She said, Ellie, the truth is like water. You can dam it, divert it, try to hold it back, but eventually it finds a way through." Then she made me promise to never stop looking, never stop pushing, never stop believing that someday the dam would break. Victoria moved to stand beside the old woman. Tonight, the dam breaks. Tonight, we find out if a century of patience was worth anything. Eleanor looked up at her. Whatever happens, thank you for believing me, for fighting, for being the Hartwell who finally chose the right side. At 1:45, Richard's radio crackled. Movement at the service entrance. 4 individuals, tactical gear weapons visible. Victoria's heart rate spiked. It was really happening. Confirmed, another voice reported. They're cutting the power now. The apartment plunged into darkness for a moment before the emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in dim red light. They're in the building, heading for the service elevator. Victoria drew her weapon, a Glock 19 she'd retrieved from storage. It felt familiar in her hand, like greeting an old friend. Remember the plan? She said quietly. We let them reach the door. We let them commit to the breach. Then we close the trap. And if they start shooting immediately, then we shoot back. The minutes stretched like hours. Victoria could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the adrenaline coursing through her system. This was the feeling she'd lived with for 20 years. The moment before violence when everything hung in balance. Richard's radio crackled again. 3rd floor, coming your way? Then 4th floor, they're checking doors, confirming apartment numbers. And finally, they're at your door. Victoria positioned herself behind the heavy couch they'd moved to provide cover. Richard took position near the bedroom door. Eleanor sat in her wheelchair in the center of the room, looking for all the world like a helpless old woman surrounded by files. The bait. Victoria heard muffled voices outside the door. Then the sound of electronic equipment. A soft beep as the lock was bypassed. The door swung open. 4 figures in black tactical gear moved in with professional precision weapons raised, sweeping the room with practiced efficiency. The first one spotted Eleanor and barked, "Don't move! Where are the files?" Eleanor pointed toward the boxes stacked against the far wall. "Take them. Take whatever you want. Just don't hurt me." Her voice was perfect, terrified, helpless. Exactly what they expected to find. 2 of the men moved toward the boxes. The other 2 kept their weapons trained on Eleanor. "Check the other rooms," one of them ordered. A man started toward the bedroom where Richard waited. Victoria's radio crackled once. The signal. Everything happened at once. Richard burst from the bedroom, disarming the approaching intruder with a move that spoke of decades of military training. Victoria rose from behind the couch weapon trained on the 2 men near Eleanor. "FBI, drop your weapons." It wasn't technically true anymore, but old habits died hard, and the authority in her voice made all 4 men freeze for a crucial moment. "You're surrounded," Victoria continued. "There are 3 more operators outside this door and police on the way. You can die here, or you can drop your weapons and walk out alive. Your choice." The men exchanged glances. Professional calculation replacing initial surprise. "We were told this would be easy," so one of them said. "We were told it was just an old woman and some papers." "You were lied to. Derek Ashford sent you into a trap." "Ashford? We don't know any Ashford." "Really? Then who's paying you?" Silence. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria said. "You're going to put down your weapons. You're going to tell me everything about who hired you and what your instructions were. And in exchange, I'm going to recommend leniency when you're arrested for breaking and entering conspiracy to commit murder and whatever else the district attorney decides to charge you with. Or I make 1 phone call and the 3 men outside this door come in with a very different set of instructions." The leader of the group looked at his colleagues. Something passed between them. Then slowly he lowered his weapon to the floor. "Smart choice," Victoria said. Richard moved forward, securing the weapons while Victoria kept the men covered. "Now," she said, "let's talk about Derek Ashford." The interrogation took 3 hours. By the time Victoria was done, she had names, dates, and a chain of communication that led directly to Derek Ashford's personal assistant. The men had been hired through a series of intermediaries, but the money trail was clear. And they had recorded instructions sent via encrypted message that spelled out exactly what they were supposed to do: eliminate witnesses, secure all documents, make it look like a burglary. "This is enough," Richard said as dawn broke over Alexandria. "This is enough to put him away. It's enough to arrest him. Whether it's enough to convict him depends on how good his lawyers are. Then we make sure the public sees the evidence before any lawyer can spin it." Victoria picked up her phone and called Sarah Chen. "Publish everything, now." At 9 o'clock that morning, the Washington Post website led with a story that would dominate national news for weeks. Century-old mass murder uncovered, prominent families implicated in circus tragedy. The article detailed the discovery at the Hartwell workshop, the underground chamber containing 34 victims, and the documented evidence linking Samuel Hartwell and Dr. Nathaniel Ashford to their deaths. It included quotes from Eleanor Sterling-Martinez, photographs from Luna Sterling's archives, and excerpts from Dr. Ashford's own records. It also included new information Derek Ashford's attempt to suppress the evidence by force, the recorded instructions to his hired contractors, and the testimony of the men now in police custody. Within 2 hours, Derek Ashford was arrested at his London hotel where he'd fled after receiving word that his plan had failed. Extradition proceedings began immediately. Within 4 hours, the Ashford family released a statement attempting to distance themselves from Derek's actions. It fooled no one. Within 6 hours, archaeological teams were mobilized to properly excavate the underground chamber and give the 34 victims the dignified burial they had been denied for a century. Victoria watched the news coverage from Eleanor's apartment, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Emma and Marcus had returned as soon as they heard it was safe, and they sat together as a family for the first time in years. Richard was there too, occupying the uncomfortable space between past and present that divorced couples know so well. "It's over," Emma said quietly, watching footage of Derek being led away in handcuffs. "It's really over." "Not yet," Victoria replied. "There'll be trials, legal battles. The Ashford family has resources to drag this out for years." "But the truth is out. They can't bury it anymore." "No, they can't." Eleanor wheeled herself closer to the television, watching with eyes that held a century of waiting finally fulfilled. "Luna," she whispered, "we did it. We finally did it." Victoria looked at the old woman, at the tears streaming down her weathered face at the release of a burden carried for 90 years, and she understood perhaps for the first time what justice really meant. Not punishment, not revenge, not even vindication. Just the simple acknowledgement that what happened mattered, that the people who died deserved to be remembered, that the truth, however long delayed, would eventually find its way into the light. The dam had broken, and the water was flowing free. That evening, Victoria received a phone call from Claire Ashford. "Thank you," Claire said, "for stopping him, for ending what our family started 100 years ago. You're the one who made this possible. You took the risk. It was the least I could do after everything my family has done." Claire paused. "I'm leaving the country, starting over somewhere the Ashford name doesn't follow me. I just wanted you to know that not all of us are like Derek. Not all of us believe that legacy justifies any action. I know, and for what it's worth, I hope you find peace." "I hope we all do, Mrs. Hartwell. I think we've earned it." After hanging up, Victoria walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, 34 families would soon learn what had happened to their ancestors. Somewhere out there, historians were already working to piece together the full story of the Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show. And somewhere out there, a young woman named Claire Ashford was starting a new life free from the weight of crimes she didn't commit. Legacy, Victoria thought. It was a choice, not a sentence. What you inherited mattered less than what you did with it. Eleanor had chosen to spend her life seeking justice for people she'd never met. Derek had chosen to protect secrets that weren't worth protecting. And Victoria had chosen finally to be the kind of person her children could be proud of. "Mom?" Emma appeared beside her. "Are you okay?" "I'm tired, but I'm okay." Victoria put her arm around her daughter. "How about you?" "I don't know yet. I think it's going to take a while to process everything." Emma leaned into her mother's embrace. "But I'm glad I have you, and Marcus, and even Dad." "Family," Victoria said quietly. "Imperfect, complicated, but real." "Is that enough?" Victoria thought about the question, about all the ways she'd failed her marriage, her children, herself, about all the ways she'd tried to make up for those failures, about the long road ahead and the uncertain future waiting at the end of it. "It's a start," she said finally, "and sometimes a start is all you need." H. Part 4. Lưu ý, viết đủ 400 liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện phá hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liên mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liên mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10-10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lỗi AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết làng màn, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong một tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới 2-3 phút, cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax mới phần cũ. 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đàn sen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn, tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả thêm đánh dấu thời gian. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh không có phần gạch trong bài viết và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more part 4. 2 weeks after Derek Ashford's arrest, Victoria stood in a Virginia courtroom watching the man who had pursued her family face a judge for the first time on American soil. He looked different now. The charm was gone, replaced by something hollow and desperate. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, and dark circles ringed his eye. Prison had already begun to strip away the polished exterior he'd cultivated so carefully. Derek Ashford, you are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, breaking and entering attempted theft of historical artifacts, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Derek's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Derek shook his head. Not guilty, Your Honor. Victoria felt Emma stiffen beside her. They had expected this, but hearing Derek deny everything still hurt. Bail is set at $5 million. The defendant is considered a flight risk given his international resources and connections. Derek's family had the money. Victoria knew he would be out within hours. But it didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial would be a formality. What mattered was what came next. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah Chen had broken the story, but now every news outlet in the country wanted a piece of it. Victoria pushed through the crowd, shielding Emma with her body. Mrs. Hartwell, is it true you discovered the underground chamber yourself? Mrs. Hartwell, how do you feel about your family's connection to the murders? Mrs. Hartwell, will you testify against Derek Ashford? She ignored them all, guiding Emma toward the waiting car where Richard and Marcus sat. That was brutal, Emma said once they were inside. How do people live like that? Cameras everywhere, questions being shouted at you. They don't live like that. They survive it. Janki, Victoria looked back at the courthouse where Derek was being led away. And then they move on. But moving on was easier said than done. Over the following weeks, Victoria found herself caught in a media hurricane that showed no signs of dying down. Interview requests poured in daily. Documentary filmmakers called constantly. Publishers offered book deals worth more money than she'd ever seen. She turned them all down. The story isn't mine to tell, she explained to Eleanor during one of their now frequent visits. It belongs to the people who died in that chamber. It belongs to Luna and everyone who kept looking for the truth. The story belongs to whoever tells it, Eleanor replied, and I'd rather it be told by someone who cares about the truth than someone who just wants ratings. Then you tell it. I'm 90 years old, Victoria. I won't live to see the trial finished, let alone write a book. Eleanor reached for Victoria's hand. But you could. You could make sure the world remembers them properly. Victoria thought about it. She'd spent 20 years telling stories of crime and consequence of victims and perpetrators. Maybe this was one more story that needed telling. I'll think about it, she said. The archaeological excavation of the underground chamber took 3 months to complete. Victoria visited the site weekly, watching as teams of experts carefully documented and removed artifacts that had been hidden for nearly a century. The circus wagons were transported to a conservation facility where they would be restored. Personal belongings were cataloged and, where possible, returned to descendants of the victims. And the remains. 34 sets of human bones, including 7 children, were recovered and prepared for proper burial. DNA testing confirmed their identities, matching them to names on the company roster Victoria had found in that first ledger. Families who had wondered for generations what happened to their ancestors finally had answers. One afternoon in November, Victoria received a call from the lead archaeologist. "We found something you need to see," Dr. Patricia Huang said. "Can you come to the site?" Victoria arrived within the hour. The workshop had been demolished weeks ago, replaced by a careful excavation that had expanded far beyond the original chamber. What they'd found was even larger than anyone expected. "This way." Dr. Huang led her down a temporary staircase into the earth. "We discovered a second chamber yesterday, hidden behind a false wall that collapsed during the original excavation." Victoria followed, her heart racing. A second chamber. They emerged into a space roughly half the size of the main burial area. But this room was different. Instead of wagons and personal belongings, it contained something else entirely. Medical equipment, examination tables, glass jars filled with preserved specimens, and filing cabinets, dozens of them lining every wall. "Dr. Ashford's laboratory," Victoria breathed. "We believe so. The documentation is extensive. He kept records of everything." Dr. Huang's voice was carefully neutral, but Victoria could hear the horror underneath. "I have to warn you, some of what we found is extremely disturbing." "Show me." The next 2 hours were among the worst of Victoria's life. Dr. Nathaniel Ashford had been more than a murderer. He had been a monster who used scientific language to justify atrocities. His records detailed experiments conducted on living subjects before they died, tests designed to document their physical abnormalities in excruciating detail. He had photographed everything, documented everything, preserved everything, and he had done it all with the cold clinical detachment of someone who didn't see his victims as human beings. "There's more?" Dr. Huang said quietly. "We found correspondence, letters between Ashford and other physicians of the era, a network of collectors who traded in what they called medical curiosities. A network. We've identified at least a dozen names so far. Prominent doctors, researchers, museum curators. All of them received specimens from Ashford after the circus disappeared." Victoria felt sick. The horror was even larger than she'd imagined. Not just two men exploiting vulnerable people, but an entire community of educated professionals who saw nothing wrong with what was being done. "This changes things," she said. "This isn't just a century-old murder case anymore. This is systematic exploitation on an industrial scale." "Yes, and it raises uncomfortable questions about institutions that might still have items in their collections that originated here." Victoria thought about the implications. Museums, medical schools, private collections around the world, all of them potentially holding remains or artifacts stolen from the Sterling Brothers circus. "We need to make this public," she said. "All of it." "Are you sure the backlash will be enormous? Institutions don't like admitting they've built collections on stolen goods." "I don't care what they like. Those people deserve to be returned to their families. Every single one of them." Dr. Huang nodded slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that." The press conference was held 2 days later. Victoria stood at a podium flanked by Dr. Huang, Eleanor Sterling-Martinez, and a representative from the FBI's art crime team. Cameras clicked and whirred as she outlined what they had discovered in the second chamber. "We are calling on museums, medical schools, and private collectors worldwide to examine their holdings for any connection to the Sterling Brothers circus or Dr. Nathaniel Ashford's network. We are prepared to provide documentation and assistance to any institution willing to participate in this process of repatriation." A reporter raised her hand. "Mrs. Hartwell, isn't this essentially accusing major institutions of receiving stolen property?" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm presenting facts and asking institutions to act with integrity. What they do with that information is up to them." "What if they refuse? Then we'll pursue legal remedies. The FBI has already opened an investigation. International partners are being contacted. This is not going away." Another reporter. "How extensive do you believe this network was?" "Based on Dr. Ashford's correspondence, we believe specimens from the Sterling Circus may have ended up in at least 24 collections across 3 continents. The full scope is still being determined." "And the Ashford family, were they aware of this?" Victoria paused. This was the question she'd been dreading. "We have evidence suggesting that knowledge of Dr. Ashford's activities has been passed down through generations of the family. Whether that rises to the level of criminal liability is for prosecutors to determine." The Ashford family's response came within hours. A formal statement released through their attorneys denied all knowledge of the second chamber and its contents. They expressed shock and horror at the revelations and pledged full cooperation with investigators. Victoria didn't believe a word of it. That evening, she received an unexpected visitor at Eleanor's apartment. Margaret Ashford Derrick's mother was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of rigid posture that spoke of a lifetime of maintaining appearances. She arrived without announcement, pushing past Richard when he answered the door. "Mrs. Hartwell, we need to talk." Victoria stood slowly, placing herself between Margaret and Eleanor. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." "On the contrary, we have a great deal to discuss." Margaret's voice was cold but controlled. "You've destroyed my son, ruined my family's reputation, and now you're threatening to expose institutions that have nothing to do with what happened a century ago. Those institutions are holding human remains stolen from murdered people. They have everything to do with it. They're holding medical specimens acquired through legitimate channels. The documentation exists. Documentation provided by a mass murderer to cover his crimes." Victoria didn't back down. "Your family has known the truth for generations. You've protected it hidden, it profited from it. That ends now." "Does it?" Margaret's eyes were ice. "You think one trial, one newspaper story is enough to bring down the Ashfords? We've survived worse. We'll survive this." "Maybe, but you won't survive it unchanged. The world knows what Nathaniel Ashford did. The world knows what your son tried to do. No amount of money or influence can erase that. Money and influence can accomplish quite a lot, Mrs. Hartwell. Your own career is proof of that. Do you think anyone outside this room has forgotten what you did in Baltimore?" Victoria felt the words like a blade. Derek had used the same threat. Now his mother was wielding it. "I haven't forgotten. I live with it every day. The difference between me and your family is that I accept responsibility for my choices. I don't hide behind lawyers and legacy." "Responsibility," Margaret laughed bitterly. "You destroyed a man's life outside the law. You took justice into your own hands because you decided the system wasn't good enough for someone like you. And now you stand there judging my family." "I'm not judging anyone. I'm telling the truth, something your family has been afraid of for 100 years. Margaret stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The truth can be shaped, Mrs. Hartwell. Molded. Directed. My family has been doing it for generations. We'll find a way to shape this, too. Not this time. We'll see." Margaret turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. My daughter Claire. You helped her disappear." Victoria kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Margaret's smile was knowing. "But if you should happen to speak with her, please tell her something for me." "What?" "Tell her she's made a powerful enemy, and unlike my son, I don't make mistakes." The door closed behind her. Victoria let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That woman terrifies me," Emma said quietly. She had watched the entire exchange from the hallway. "She should." Margaret Ashford is the real power behind that family. Derek was just the public face. Victoria looked at Eleanor, who had remained silent throughout. "She's not going to stop." "No," Eleanor agreed. "She's not, but neither are we." The trial began in January. Victoria testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail of her discovery and the subsequent investigation. She described finding the underground chamber the evidence of mass murder and Derek's attempt to suppress the truth through violence. Derek's lawyers did their best to discredit her. They brought up Baltimore. They questioned her motives. They suggested she had fabricated evidence to make a name for herself. It didn't matter. The physical evidence was overwhelming. The testimony of the hired contractors was damning. And Eleanor Sterling-Martinez, 90 years old and frail but absolutely lucid, told the jury a story that had been waiting a century to be heard. "My grandmother Luna was 16 years old when she watched her family die." Eleanor set her voice steady despite her age. She spent the rest of her life trying to tell the world what happened. No one believed her. No one cared. She died thinking her family would be forgotten forever. She looked directly at Derek, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. But she was wrong. Truth has patience. And eventually even the deepest buried secrets find their way into the light. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek Ashford was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His mother watched from the gallery, her expression revealing nothing. But Victoria saw her hands trembling as the sentence was read. After the verdict, Victoria found herself alone in a courthouse hallway, exhausted and hollow. The adrenaline that had sustained her for months was finally fading, leaving behind a weariness that went bone deep. "Mrs. Hartwell." She turned to find a young woman approaching. Early 20s, dark hair, features that seemed vaguely familiar. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Isabella Rodriguez. My great-great-grandmother was Magdalena Sterling, the fortune teller." Victoria straightened. "You're a descendant." "One of several. We've been following the trial, all of us." Isabella's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I wanted to thank you for finding them, for fighting for them, for making sure the world finally knows what happened. I didn't do it alone. Eleanor, Luna, they're the ones who never gave up. But you're the one who brought it to light. You're the one who risked everything when you could have walked away." Isabella reached out and took Victoria's hand. "My mother cried for 3 days when she heard the verdict. Happy tears. She said her grandmother used to tell stories about Magdalena, about her kindness, her gift for seeing truth in people. She said Magdalena would have been proud to know that a woman like you finally brought justice to her family." Victoria felt tears threatening. "I don't know about proud. I just did what needed to be done." "That's exactly what makes you worthy of pride." Isabella squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. From all of us, thank you." The memorial planning began immediately after the trial. Victoria worked with Eleanor, descendants of the victims, and local officials to design a space that would honor the Sterling brothers' traveling wonder show. The workshop site would be transformed into a garden with individual memorials for each of the 34 people who had died there. The circus wagons, now fully restored, would be displayed under protective structures. A small museum would house artifacts and tell the story of what had happened, and at the center of everything, a fountain surrounded by stones bearing the names of the victims. "It's not enough," Victoria said one evening looking at the architectural plans. "Nothing will ever be enough." "Nothing can bring them back," Eleanor agreed, "but this ensures they're remembered. That's all Luna ever wanted. That's all any of us ever wanted." "Do you think she would approve?" "I think she would weep with joy." Eleanor's voice cracked. "I wish she could have lived to see it. I wish she could have stood on that ground and known that her family was finally at peace." "Maybe she knows, wherever she is." "Maybe." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I like to think so." Richard found Victoria on the memorial site 3 days before the dedication ceremony. She was walking the paths that would soon be filled with visitors tracing the layout she had helped design. The garden was nearly complete, the memorial stones in place, the fountain ready to be unveiled. "Emma told me you'd be here," he said, falling into step beside her. "I wanted to see it finished before the crowds come." "It's beautiful. Eleanor showed me the plans, but seeing it in person is different." They walked in silence for a while, the way they used to walk together years ago, before the job consumed everything, before the distance between them became uncrossable. "I've been thinking," Richard said finally, "about us, about what went wrong." "Richard." "Let me finish, please." He stopped, turning to face her. "I blamed you for years, for putting the job first, for bringing the darkness home, for not being present even when you were physically there. You weren't wrong. Maybe not, but I wasn't right either. I knew who you were when I married you. I knew the job would demand everything. I just thought I could compete with it." He laughed softly. "Turns out I was the arrogant one." "You weren't arrogant. You were patient. More patient than anyone had a right to be. And then I stopped being patient. I gave up." Richard's eyes held old regret. "That's on me, not you." Victoria felt tears threatening again. This was a conversation they should have had years ago. A conversation that might have changed everything. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm sorry for giving up, for not fighting harder, for letting the best thing that ever happened to me slip away because I was too stubborn to admit I was part of the problem." "Richard, I'm not asking for anything. I know too much time has passed. Too much has changed. But I needed you to know. Whatever happens next, whatever the future holds, I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to show it." Victoria stared at him, hearing her own words from months ago echoed back at her. "I said that to you," she whispered, "the night before the raid." "I know. I've been thinking about it ever since." He reached out, hesitated, then let his hand drop. "Maybe we're both bad at showing love. Maybe that's why we fit together in the first place. And now I don't know. The kids are grown. The case is finished. You have choices to make about what comes next." Richard stepped back. "I just wanted you to have all the information before you make them." He walked away, leaving Victoria alone with the memorial stones and the weight of everything unsaid between them. The dedication ceremony drew thousands of people. Descendants of circus performers traveled from across the country and around the world. Historians, journalists, and officials filled every available seat. The governor spoke. Representatives of institutions that had returned stolen specimens made public apologies. And at the center of it all, Victoria stood beside Eleanor Sterling-Martinez as the fountain was unveiled. Water rose into the air, catching the light falling back to earth in patterns that seemed almost alive. Around the fountain, 34 stones bore 34 names. "We gather today to remember those who were lost," the governor said, "to honor their lives, acknowledge their deaths, and commit ourselves to ensuring that nothing like this ever happens again." Eleanor was given the honor of speaking last. She wheeled herself to the podium, looking out at the crowd with eyes that had seen 90 years of struggle and finally triumph. "My grandmother Luna Sterling was 16 years old when she escaped from the underground chamber where her family was dying. She spent the rest of her life trying to tell their story. Today, that story is finally told." Her voice wavered but held. "I am old now. I have lived long enough to see justice done, and that is more than most people are given. But I want to leave you with something my grandmother told me when I was a child." She paused, gathering herself. She said, "The truth is like water. You can dam it, divert, try to hold it back, but eventually it finds a way through." Eleanor looked at Victoria, and something passed between them. Gratitude, respect, the bond of warriors who had fought the same battle. Today the dam has broken, today the water flows free, and today my family can finally rest. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause rolled across the memorial garden like thunder. Victoria felt Emma take one hand and Marcus take the other. Richard stood behind them, his presence solid and reassuring. A family, imperfect, broken, but still standing. Eleanor caught her eye from across the podium and smiled. It was over, and it was just beginning. That night, Victoria sat alone on a bench in the memorial garden, watching the fountain illuminate the darkness. 34 names, 34 lives, 34 people who had deserved better than the fate that found them. She thought about legacy, about what we inherit and what we choose, about the choices that define us and the consequences that echo through generations. Samuel Hartwell had chosen greed. Nathaniel Ashford had chosen cruelty. Derek had chosen to continue their legacy of destruction, but Luna Sterling had chosen truth. Eleanor had chosen persistence, and Victoria had chosen finally to be the kind of person who faced darkness rather than looking away. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "You okay?" She smiled and typed back, "I'm good, just thinking." About what? About what comes next. And Victoria looked up at the stars, at the darkness that pressed around the memorial garden, at the fountain that spoke of hope in the language of water and light. "I think I'm ready to find out." 1 year had passed since the dedication ceremony. Victoria stood at the entrance to the Sterling Memorial Garden, watching the October sun warm the hills of the Shenandoah Valley. The garden had become a pilgrimage site, drawing thousands of visitors each month. People came to learn to remember to pay respects to 34 lives that had been silenced for a century. Today was different. Today was the anniversary. Emma arrived first, parking her car in the visitor lot and walking toward her mother with a confidence that hadn't existed a year ago. At 20 now, she had spent her gap year helping build this place, and the work had transformed her. "You're early," Victoria said. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about everything that happened to bring us here." Good thoughts or bad thoughts? Both, mostly good. Emma stood beside her mother, looking out at the memorial stones. "I think about Derek sometimes, not missing him, just wondering how someone becomes what he became. Legacy, environment, choices, the same things that make all of us who we are. But we had the same inputs, you and I. Growing up in a family with dark history, we didn't become monsters. No, but we had something Derek didn't have. What? People who loved us enough to tell us the truth, even when the truth was hard." Marcus appeared on the path, Richard walking beside him. At 17 now, Marcus had grown into his height, his lanky frame filling out with the beginnings of adult muscle, but his eyes were the same, quiet, watchful, seeing everything. "The others are on their way," Richard said. "Eleanor's caregiver called. She had a rough night, but she's determined to be here." Victoria felt a familiar pang of worry. Eleanor had declined significantly over the past year, her 91-year-old body finally surrendering to time. The doctor said it could be weeks or months, but probably not years. She shouldn't push herself. Try telling her that. Richard almost smiled. She said, and I quote, "I've waited 90 years to see justice done. I'm not missing the anniversary because of a little fatigue." Stubborn woman. Reminds me of someone. Victoria caught Richard's eye and something passed between them. The past year had changed their relationship in ways neither had expected. Not a reconciliation exactly, more like a rediscovery. Two people learning to know each other again after years of distance. "Dad," Emma said carefully, "are you and Mom ever going to tell us what's going on with you two?" "Nothing's going on. You've had dinner together 6 times in the past month. We're co-parents, we communicate. You went to a movie last week." Richard looked at Victoria, caught. "How did you know about that?" "Marcus told me." "Marcus," Richard turned to his son, "I thought we had an understanding. You asked me not to mention it to Emma. You didn't say anything about her finding out on her own." Marcus shrugged. "Technical loophole." "You're going to make a great lawyer someday." "I'm thinking forensic archaeology, actually, after everything that happened here." Victoria felt a rush of pride. Her son had found direction in the midst of tragedy, something good emerging from something terrible. "Let's talk about this later," she said. "People are arriving." The anniversary gathering was smaller than the dedication ceremony, but more intimate. Descendants of circus performers, historians, journalists who had covered the story, and friends who had become family over the past year. Isabella Rodriguez was there, representing the growing community of Sterling descendants who had connected through the memorial. Dr. Patricia Huang came with her archaeological team. Sarah Chen, whose Washington Post story had started the media firestorm, arrived with a photographer, and Eleanor wheeled in by her caregiver, looking frail but fiercely present. "Help me to the podium," she told Victoria. "I have something to say." "Eleanor, you should rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead, which according to my doctors won't be long." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with dark humor. "Let me have this, Victoria. Let me speak to them one more time." Victoria helped her to the small stage that had been set up near the fountain. The crowd fell silent as Eleanor gathered herself. "1 year ago, we dedicated this garden to 34 people who were murdered by men who believed their lives had no value. Today, we gather to remember them, to honor them, and to celebrate what their story has taught us." Her voice was weaker than it had been, but it carried. "In the past year, 17 institutions have returned. Remains and artifacts stolen from the Sterling Circus. Families who wondered for generations what happened to their ancestors have finally received answers. And a man who tried to continue his family's legacy of violence is spending the rest of his life in prison." Eleanor paused, catching her breath. "But this anniversary is not about Derek Ashford. It's not even about justice, though justice matters. This anniversary is about remembering that every life has value. Every person has a story. Every death deserves acknowledgement." And she looked out at the crowd at the faces of people who had been touched by this story. "My grandmother Luna escaped from that underground chamber 99 years ago. She spent the rest of her life trying to tell the world what happened. Most people didn't believe her, most people didn't care, but she never stopped hoping that someday someone would listen." Eleanor's eyes found Victoria. "Someone did listen, someone cared, and because of that, my family is finally at peace." The crowd applauded. Eleanor accepted the tribute with quiet dignity, then gestured for Victoria to help her back to her wheelchair. "That's the last speech I'll ever give," Eleanor said quietly as Victoria wheeled her away from the stage. "I can feel it." "Don't talk like that. Why not? Death is coming. It's been patient, but it won't wait much longer." Eleanor reached up and took Victoria's hand. "I need to tell you something I've been saving." "What?" "Not here. Somewhere private. Tonight after the ceremony." "Eleanor." "Promise me, Victoria. This is important." Victoria looked into the old woman's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of death, but of leaving something undone. "I promise." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of speeches, music, and remembrance. Victoria moved through it on autopilot, her mind fixed on Eleanor's words. What could be so important that it had to wait until they were alone? As the sun began to set, the crowd dispersed. Emma and Marcus helped clean up while Richard coordinated with the site staff. Victoria found Eleanor sitting alone near the fountain, watching the water catch the fading light. "Everyone's gone," Victoria said. "Tell me what you need to say." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into the bag attached to her wheelchair and withdrew a sealed envelope. "This is Luna's final letter. She wrote it the week before she died. She gave it to my mother with instructions that it should only be opened when the truth about the circus was finally known." "Why didn't you open it after the trial?" "Because Luna's instructions were specific. The letter was to be read by a Hartwell who had proven themselves worthy of the trust." Victoria stared at the envelope. "You're giving this to me?" "Luna wrote this letter for someone like you. Someone who chose truth over legacy. Someone who was willing to sacrifice everything to do what was right." Eleanor pressed the envelope into Victoria's hands. "I think she knew somehow that someday a Hartwell would come along who was different. Who would break the pattern." "What does it say?" "I don't know. I've never read it. Neither did my mother." Eleanor's eyes held Victoria's. But Luna was more than just a witness to what happened in that chamber. She was a fortune-teller's apprentice. She had gifts that other people didn't understand. "You think she predicted something? I think she saw something. Whether it was the future or just the shape of what was possible, I can't say. But she believed this letter mattered. She believed the person who read it would need what it contained." Victoria turned the envelope over in her hands. The paper was old, yellowed with age, but the seal was intact. Luna Sterling had closed this letter nearly a century ago, and it had remained closed ever since. "Read it when you're ready," Eleanor said, "and whatever it says, remember that Luna believed in possibility. She believed that even the darkest legacies could be transformed by the right choices. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Thank you, Victoria, for giving an old woman the ending she always dreamed of." Eleanor smiled, and for a moment she looked young again, hopeful, at peace. Now help me to my car. I'm tired and I have a feeling I won't need to be tired much longer. Shami. Victoria wheeled Eleanor to where her caregiver waited. She helped transfer the frail woman into the vehicle, feeling bones that seemed to weigh nothing at all. One more thing, Eleanor said through the window. When the time comes, and it will be soon, I want to be buried here, near the fountain, near my family. I'll make sure of it. I know you will. Eleanor reached through the window and touched Victoria's face. You're a good woman, Victoria Hartwell. Your ancestor committed terrible crimes, but you've redeemed the name. Luna would be proud. I'm proud. The car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the gathering darkness. Victoria stood alone, the envelope pressed against her heart, feeling the weight of a century of waiting finally coming to rest. She didn't open the letter that night. Instead, she gathered her family and drove to a small restaurant in town where they shared a meal and stories and the kind of laughter that only comes after surviving something terrible together. Emma talked about her plans for college, finally ready to resume her education after the year of healing. Marcus described his applications to forensic archaeology programs, his passion for uncovering buried truths clearly inherited from his mother. Richard listened and encouraged and laughed at the right moments present in a way he hadn't been for years. And Victoria watched them all, feeling something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Happiness. Not the absence of pain. Not the forgetting of what had happened. But happiness anyway. Despite everything. Because of everything. Later, alone in the small house she'd rented near the memorial site, Victoria finally opened the envelope. Luna Sterling's handwriting was elegant, precise, the penmanship of someone who took care with words. To the Hartwell who breaks the chain, the letter began. If you are reading this, then the truth has finally emerged. The people I loved have been remembered, and you have chosen differently than your ancestors chose. I am writing this in 1987, 61 years after I escaped from the chamber where my family died. I have spent my entire life carrying the weight of what I witnessed. There were times I wanted to give up, times I thought the truth would die with me, but something kept me going. A vision I had the night before. We were trapped underground. My Aunt Magdalena was the fortune teller, but she taught me her craft. She said I had the gift, though I never fully developed it. Most of what I saw was shadows and suggestions, nothing clear enough to act on. Except once. The night before Samuel Hartwell sealed us underground, I dreamed of a woman. She had dark hair and tired eyes, and the bearing of someone who had seen too much suffering. She was standing in a garden, surrounded by stones bearing names I recognized. My family's names. In the dream, she turned and looked directly at me, Dimtami, and she said, I'm coming. It will take time, but I'm coming. Hold on. I woke up believing help would arrive. I was wrong. The help I thought was coming didn't save us. Almost everyone I loved died in that chamber. But the dream stayed with me. For 61 years, I've wondered who that woman was. Now as I write this letter, I believe I finally understand. She wasn't coming to save us. She was coming to remember us. I believe you are that woman. I believe that somehow, across the span of decades, I was given a glimpse of the person who would finally bring justice to my family. I don't know how this is possible. I don't know if I'm right. Perhaps this letter will be read by someone else entirely, and my belief will mean nothing. But if you are the woman I saw, if you are the Hartwell who breaks the chain, then I want you to know something. You are not your ancestors. You are not bound by their choices or their crimes. You are free to be something different, something better. The fortune teller's gift is not seeing the future. It's seeing possibility. The infinite branching paths that each moment contains. I saw you in that dream because you were possible. Because a world existed where a Hartwell could choose truth over legacy, justice over profit, love over fear. You made that world real. Thank you for coming. Even if it took 100 years. Thank you for remembering us. With gratitude across time, Luna Sterling, December 1987. Victoria read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Luna had seen her. 61 years before they would meet across the divide of death, Luna had dreamed of the woman who would finally tell her family's story. It was impossible. Irrational. The kind of thing Victoria would have dismissed as fantasy before everything that happened. But she had spent the past year learning that the world contained more than she understood, that patterns connected across time, that choices made in one generation echoed through those that followed. Maybe Luna's dream was just a dream, a desperate hope given shape by a young woman's grief. Or maybe it was something else, a glimpse of possibility that had sustained her through decades of waiting. Either way, the letter gave Victoria something she hadn't known she needed: permission to believe that her choices mattered. To believe that breaking the chain of her family's darkness was worth the cost. She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her bed. Tomorrow she would tell Eleanor what it said. But Eleanor died that night. The caregiver found her in the morning, peaceful in her bed, a small smile on her face. She had passed some time in the early hours, slipping away quietly after 91 years of fighting. Victoria received the call at 7 in the morning. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, holding Luna's letter, crying for a woman who had become something like a mother to her over the past year. Then she called her children, called Richard, called the others who had been part of this journey, and she began planning the funeral that Eleanor had requested. They buried Eleanor Sterling-Martinez 3 days later in a plot near the fountain in the memorial garden she had helped create. The ceremony was small, and private, attended only by those who had known her best. Victoria spoke last. Eleanor Sterling-Martinez spent 91 years searching for truth. She inherited a mission from her grandmother Luna and carried it forward with absolute determination. She never married, never had children of her own. She dedicated everything to ensuring that the people who died in that underground chamber would be remembered. Victoria's voice cracked, but held. In the end, she succeeded. The Sterling Brothers Traveling Wonder Show is no longer forgotten. The 34 people who died there have names, faces, stories, and the men who killed them have been exposed, their legacies destroyed. She looked at Eleanor's grave, fresh earth dark against the green grass. Luna Sterling escaped from that chamber believing that someday someone would listen. Eleanor believed the same thing. They were right. Someone listened. Someone cared. And because of their faith, their persistence, their refusal to give up justice was finally done. Victoria reached into her pocket and withdrew the letter. Luna wrote this letter in 1987 to be opened when the truth was finally known. She described a dream she had the night before her family was trapped underground. A vision of a woman standing in a garden surrounded by memorial stones telling her that help was coming. She unfolded the letter and read the final paragraphs aloud. "You are not your ancestors. You are not bound by their choices or their crimes. You are free to be something different, something better. The fortune teller's gift is not seeing the future. It's seeing possibility." Victoria looked up at the gathered mourners. Luna saw possibility. Eleanor believed in possibility, and together across a century, they made that possibility real. She placed the letter on Eleanor's grave, weighing it down with a smooth stone. "Rest now, Eleanor. You've earned it, and know that what you built will endure. The garden will stand, the story will be told, and no one will ever forget what happened here." The mourners dispersed slowly, leaving Victoria alone with the graves and the fountain and the weight of everything that had happened. Emma found her there an hour later. "Mom, are you okay?" "I don't know. I think so. It's just a lot to process." "You've been processing for a year." "This is different. Eleanor was the last connection to Luna, the last person who remembered the mission from the beginning." Victoria looked at her daughter. "Now it's just us." "Is that bad?" "No, it's just different. Responsibility passing from one generation to another." Emma sat beside her mother on the bench near Eleanor's grave. "What are you going to do now? The trial's over. The memorial's built. Eleanor's gone. What comes next?" It was the question Victoria had been asking herself for months. "I've been offered a position," she said slowly. "Advisory role with the FBI's art crime team. They want someone with my background to help investigate cases involving stolen cultural property." "That sounds perfect for you." "It would mean traveling, being away from home. The same things that destroyed my marriage the first time." "Is that what you're worried about, Dad?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Your father and I have been spending time together. You know that, but I don't know what it means yet. I don't know if we're moving towards something or just processing the past." "Have you asked him?" "I'm afraid to ask him. I'm afraid of what the answer might be." Emma took her mother's hand. "Mom, you just spent a year facing down murderers, exposing century-old crimes, and building a memorial to people you never knew. You faced Derek. You faced Margaret Ashford. You faced your own family's darkest secrets. What's your point?" "My point is that you're not afraid of anything, except maybe being happy." Emma squeezed her hand. "Ask Dad what he wants. Tell him what you want. The worst that can happen is you get clarity." "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from watching you all the things you did right and all the things you did wrong." Emma smiled. "Mostly the things you did right." That evening, Victoria asked Richard to meet her at the memorial garden. He arrived as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the paths and stones. Victoria waited near the fountain, listening to the water and gathering her courage. You wanted to talk, Richard said, approaching cautiously. That usually means something serious. It is serious. Victoria turned to face him. I've been offered a job, advisory position with the FBI. It would mean travel, long hours, the same things that pulled us apart before. And I want to take it. This past year has shown me that I'm not done fighting. I'm not done using my skills to find truth and bring feet and bring justice, but I can't make this decision without knowing where we stand. Richard was silent for a long moment. Where do you want us to stand? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. The past year, spending time together, working through everything that happened, it's felt like something more than just co-parenting. But I don't want to assume. You're not assuming. Richard stepped closer. I've felt it too. The connection we used to have coming back, the understanding, the partnership. But I'm scared too. We failed once, spectacularly. I don't want to fail again. Neither do I. They stood facing each other, two people who had once known everything about each other and had spent years becoming strangers. What if we try something different? Richard said finally. Not going back to what we had, building something new, something that accounts for who we've become, not just who we used to be. What would that look like? I don't know. Maybe it means you take the job and I support you instead of resenting you. Maybe it means we communicate honestly instead of letting things fester. Maybe it means we accept that we're both damaged and complicated and imperfect, and we choose each other anyway. Victoria felt tears threatening. You'd be willing to try that? I've been willing for a year. I was just waiting for you to be ready. Richard reached out and took her hands. I love you, Vic. I've loved you since the day we met. I never stopped, even when I was too angry and hurt to admit it. I love you too. I always have. Then let's stop being afraid. Let's stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect circumstances. Let's just try. Victoria looked at this man she had married and divorced, hurt, and been hurt by, loved and failed to love properly. Okay, she said. Let's try. Richard pulled her into an embrace, and for the first time in years, Victoria let herself believe that happiness was possible. The memorial garden witnessed their reconciliation as it had witnessed so much else. Luna Sterling's vision, Eleanor's determination, 34 lives remembered, and now new beginnings growing from the soil of old pain. Victoria accepted the FBI position 2 weeks later. She and Richard began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship, taking it one day at a time, making no assumptions about where it would lead. Emma returned to college, finally ready to continue her education. Marcus enrolled in his first forensic archaeology course, already showing promise. And the Sterling Memorial Garden continued to grow. In the spring, new flowers bloomed around the memorial stones. In the summer, school groups visited to learn about the tragedy and its legacy. In the fall, descendants of the circus performers gathered for the second anniversary celebration. Victoria spoke at every major event, keeping the story alive, ensuring that the 34 people who had died would never be forgotten again. On the second anniversary of Eleanor's death, Victoria sat alone near the fountain as the sun set. She had made this pilgrimage a personal tradition, coming here to reflect, to remember, to reconnect with the mission that had changed her life. Emma found her there, as she often did. You okay, Mom? I'm good. Just thinking about everything. Good things. Mostly, some hard things, too. Eleanor, Luna, all the people who didn't live to see justice done. Emma sat beside her. I've been thinking about something, about the letter Luna wrote. What about it? She described a dream where she saw you standing in a garden, surrounded by memorial stones. She said you looked directly at her and promised you were coming. Yes? Do you think it was real, the dream? Do you think she actually saw you? Victoria considered the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times over the past 2 years. I don't know if it was real in the way we usually mean real, but I think Luna believed it. I think that belief sustained her through decades of disappointment and frustration. I think it gave her hope when hope seemed impossible. And that's enough. It's more than enough. The dream wasn't about predicting the future, it was about seeing possibility, about believing that somewhere, somewhen, a different choice was being made. Victoria looked at her daughter. We all have that power, Emma, the power to see possibility and work toward it. That's Luna's real legacy. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I applied for an internship at the memorial, helping with educational programs, teaching kids about what happened here. You didn't tell me. I wanted to be sure I'd get it before I said anything. Emma smiled. They accepted me yesterday. Victoria felt tears threatening. Her daughter, who had been used and betrayed, who had watched her family nearly destroyed, was choosing to dedicate herself to truth and remembrance. "I'm so proud of you. I learned from the best." Emma took her mother's hand. "Both of you. You and Eleanor and Luna and everyone who refused to give up." They sat together as the stars emerged, with mother and daughter watching the fountain dance in the gathering darkness. The past year had been hard. The year before that had been harder. But something beautiful had grown from the darkness, something that would endure. Victoria thought about legacy, about the choices that define us and the consequences that echo through generations. Samuel Hartwell had chosen greed and violence. His legacy was ash. Nathaniel Ashford had chosen cruelty and exploitation. His legacy was shame. Derek had chosen to continue their darkness. His legacy was prison. But Luna Sterling had chosen truth. Eleanor had chosen persistence. Victoria had chosen justice. And Emma was choosing to carry it forward. The chain was broken. The pattern was changed. And in a garden built on the bones of the murdered new life was growing. Victoria looked up at the stars, at the vast darkness punctuated by points of ancient light. "We did it," she whispered. "We finally did it." The fountain murmured its agreement. The memorial stone stood silent witness. And somewhere across the divide of death and time, Luna Sterling smiled. The truth had found its way through. Victoria stood slowly, feeling the weight of 2 years lifting from her shoulders. She took one last look at Eleanor's grave, at the fountain, at the 34 memorial stones that would stand here forever. Then she turned to her daughter. "Ready to go home?" Emma nodded. "Ready." They walked away together, leaving the garden to its memories and its peace. Behind them, the fountain continued to flow. The stars continued to shine, and the names carved in stone continued to speak their silent testimony. Magdalena Sterling, fortune-teller, dreamer. Luna Sterling, survivor, witness. Eleanor Sterling-Martinez, guardian, fighter, and now added to the story, but never carved in stone, another name. Victoria Hartwell, the one who listened, the one who cared, the one who finally brought the truth into the light. The Sterling brothers, the traveling wonder show, had been silenced for a century. But silence, like all things, eventually ends. And when it ended, the story that emerged was one of tragedy and triumph, of darkness and light, of generations lost and generations found. It was a story about the power of truth to survive anything. It was a story about the courage required to face inherited darkness. It was a story about love and lot and loss and the choices that define who we become. And it was finally and forever a story about 34 people who were loved, who had names, and who deserved better than to be erased from history. They would never be erased again. The dam had broken, the water flowed free, and the truth, patient as stone and relentless as water, had finally found its way home.